Several years ago, this country faced a dark day. Violence in the streets of Washington, D.C., the seat of power of this country, was assaulted in a way that we never expected. Hundreds of police officers were injured. Barricades were torn down. You could see smoke rising up from the city streets. I was terrified when I saw this. I couldn't believe it was happening. Of course, I'm referring to when Antifa attacked the White House and forced Donald Trump into the emergency bunker, set fire to St. John's Church, and firebombed the White House. What are you guys here for?
Something far worse. An even darker day.
There was another insurrection? I thought May 29th was the only insurrection when the far left attacked the White House, tore down the barricades, firebombed the grounds, and set fire to St. John's Church, forcing Donald Trump into a bunker.
You're forgetting about, it was January 20th of 2017.
I was there.
You were there.
Yeah, I got arrested.
We'll see.
But not processed. There's a difference. People don't understand.
But there were a lot of arrests that night. There was a lot of people arrested for violence, and then something interesting happened. The DOJ started turning them all back out on the street again, canceling their cases. The few that went to trial were either hung juries or they were acquitted by D.C. juries, of course. Something that is not happening to...
Now, hold on there a minute. You're saying that there were two insurrections? Don't tell me there was a third one on another date at some point 3 years ago in January, perhaps on January 6th.
Not ringing the bell.
Oh, your mic's off. Okay, guys, welcome to the show. Why don't everybody introduce themselves now that we're done being morons?
Hi. My name is Joel Berry. I'm the managing editor of the Babylon Bee and one of the writers for a new movie that is coming out called January 6th, The Most Darkest Day, which is a very, very serious and thorough examination of that very horrible day in history.
We have two men who know it all firsthand, in fact.
We do. My name is Adam Johnson, or the Lectern Guy, as I'm more notably known online and in chat rooms. You can find me on Twitter. That's the only place I'm at. Bunch of kids went to prison, not out of prison now, and things are going better.
And I know it was hard for you because originally your branding was Podium Guy, and you tried really hard to correct the record.
It was via Getty up front. A lot of people who just don't understand that Getty Images takes photo, and via Getty means by Getty Images.
That was incredible.
It was, but these are the people of Twitter 1.0. And then grown since then.
There's a real journalist here.
Well, there are those who would contend with that. But yeah, Steve Baker, I'm with the Blaze Media, investigative journalist for them. On that infamous day back in 2021, January 6th, I was actually independent at the time. And so because I did not submit my story to either the New Yorker or the New York Times or someone like, I have to correct my own record. Actually, I sold my videos. One of the first entities that bought and licensed my videos was the New York Times for their documentary, HBO for their documentary.
Wow.
And yet still, nevertheless, because my view of what happened that day was a little bit different than the approved narrative, it took them over 3 years, but they finally put me in leg chains.
That was actually crazy. The video that came out of they shackled you, like you just some mild-mannered journalist, and they're like, let's make a example of him.
Yeah, and the thing is that they didn't have to do that. I was in the courtroom with actual felony defendants who were allowed to wear their suit and tie and come in with their attorney. But they instructed my attorney on the morning before I had to self-present, told them that I had to show up in shorts, T-shirt, and flip-flops.
Wow.
That was we have it in writing. It's in an email to my attorney from the Department of Justice.
What?
Yeah.
And what if you didn't?
And I didn't.
So they shackled.
I showed up in a suit, tie.
They wanted the photo. They wanted you looking up showing up on a schlub.
Yeah, yep. That was exactly what they wanted. And I knew, of course, if they did that, that meant that was an easier transfer into the orange jumpsuit and the chains. Wow. And so I asked my attorney, I said, why are they doing, because they didn't have to do this. And first of all, we're talking about, I'm a misdemeanor defendant, nonviolent misdemeanor defendant. And they don't have to do that. So felony guys are just walking into the courtroom with their lawyers. Nonviolent misdemeanor defendant is brought in leg chains and belly chains with my wrist cuffed to my stomach.
I take offense to this because I actually showed up in a white V-neck shorts and flip-flops intentionally.
You did.
That's just your normal. That's yeah.
Well, I'm from Florida. That's how we dress. And honestly, I have no respect for that court system. So why would I show it any type of?
Did they shackle you?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Now,
Well, you're. I mean, you might steal their lectern. They didn't know.
do you know karate? Are you a martial artist? I mean, is there any reason that they had to? I mean, could you have done actual damage to these guys in the courtroom?
The violence is in my pen.
Yeah, the pen is mightier.
Yeah.
And that is exactly, what because I asked my attorney, I said, why are they doing this to me? And he said, you know why. You've embarrassed them. You've been poking them in the eye for 3 years, and this is retribution.
Wow.
It's insane.
And and my attorney is 23-year former federal prosecutor himself, so he knows the rules there.
Well, y'all are working on a documentary to show the world the true evils
Yeah.
of these men.
Yeah. We didn't really necessarily set out to make something that, we need to change the narrative. We need to fight back. We need to stand, at the Babylon Bee, all we're trying to do most of the time is look for the funny. We're looking for the funniest thing that we can think of. And I think one of the funniest things that has happened over the last 3 years has just been the leftist reaction to January 6th has been so melodramatic and over the top. The way they brought in like an ABC TV executive to write the narrative for the January 6th hearings. It's
right.
Well, they're a bunch of theater kids.
Yeah, they're a bunch of theater kids. They're and it's and we've done headlines for 3 years about this, about how they're doing the January 6th cinematic extended universe and just kind of making fun of how it's really all just. I mean, it's a Hollywood thing. It's a narrative thing. And so we decided to just make fun of it because it really is just by itself very funny. And what I have been surprised to hear, just from people who have already screened it, we've sent it to a few, January 6th defendants. They've said this is the best defense and indictment of the left in their response to January 6th that I've seen, and we're just making jokes. And I think there's something powerful in just we made this documentary as in kind of a leftist voice. We have this fake leftist columnist. His name is Garth Strudelfud, and he's very angry and serious about January 6th. And we just kind of played it earnestly all the way through, and you kind of realize as you're watching it just how ridiculous this whole thing is.
You've got some competition now. There's an off-Broadway play right now that's came out. Have you seen
Yeah,
this?
I've seen the clips.
What?
There's an off-Broadway
Hold on, what?
play right now of January 6th.
It is. I mean, it almost makes me mad because it's almost funnier than what we made.
This is
Oh no. Should we? Is this? Where's the?
yeah. There's the play.
that's it
All
right
right,
there.
here we go.
Down everyone who was there. You know that's right. You know that.
Peppers!
Videos and cell phones.
Government's closing in.
Wasn't that, bad?
I don't care.
How can you not care?
Because I didn't break any laws. Tell me the law I broke.
You smashed through police barricades and you overtook the United States Capitol.
I didn't break any laws.
You carried your weapon on the federal grounds.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, I carried my weapon on the federal grounds that we own, that American citizens own.
Paying taxes gives you no
Said
right.
I pay taxes.
What?
I have every constitutional right to carry a weapon and to take over Congress. Just because a law is written does not mean it's the right law. We went in there, they scurried away like rats and hid. That is how you do it.
I thought this was you guys.
Wow. Oh my God. Yo,
Yeah,
these
it's hard
people.
to top that.
So this is the story of the kid who turned his dad in. That's what his dad. And it's funny because if you really want to imagine what those conversations were actually like, the dad sitting in the chair, slumped over with his belly sticking out, holding a beer, and the kid's like, "Dad, were you at the Capitol?" And I was like, "Oh yeah." And he's like, and that's it. That's probably all that happened.
Yeah.
And that was the first trial. It was Guy Reffitt. Was the actual real name of the character that was arrested and went to trial. And he did. He carried a firearm illegally into the district. There were a lot of people that carried firearms. It was winter. It was cold. There was a lot of places to hold, and keep a gun concealed. So there was a lot more of that going on there that day than we would want to even admit. But the most important thing that everyone has to understand is that not a single person in the crowd used those weapons against law enforcement. The only shot that day was fired by a cop.
Yeah, I think everyone agrees it's a bad day. but it's kind of funny how they've turned it into the apocalypse.
Yeah.
And that's why I opened the show by talking about May 29th, 2020. Because at the very least, you could make the argument that, by all means, say they're comparable. I don't care. The president was forced into an emergency bunker. And actually, I would say it's not even fair to call it comparable because the far left injured over 100 officers, set fire to St. John's Church. You know what? And I'm going to pull this video up. And they firebombed the White House grounds, tearing down the barricades. Nothing. The photos of that day are insane, of the smoke rising up from the streets of D.C. from the helicopter shots. It's insane.
It might also be pertinent to say that the people that day, all of them were kind of in accord. We're all going to act stupid and a fool, and we're all here to do violent things. The majority of people on January 6th were not there to do violent things. They were not acting violently. They were walking around. We've seen the tour videos. These are two different crowds completely.
They're completely different, and the timing is what, again, because the media won't cover this accurately, they don't understand that those violent provocateurs, those people that had intention of stirring something up that day, they were already there at the Capitol long before Trump ever finished his speech. And, because that whole thing erupted 25 minutes before Trump ever left the stage. And they were already breaching barricades and attacking.
They had already murdered AOC.
Take a look at this. This is a video, and this is the May 29th insurrection. This is a historic presidential church across the street from the White House. This video went viral. I should make it bigger, actually. And you can see that they broke into St. John's Church, and they set a massive fire. All the while, they were attacking police officers, setting fire in the street at the White House. They were firebombing the White House grounds. And I think the estimates are, they say somewhere between like 140 officers were injured that day. I actually blame Republicans because they did not treat this with the severity that they should have.
Yes.
And following this event, they should have had committee hearings. They should have said, how was the White House assaulted by these extremists? How was it that Donald Trump was forced into a bunker? But they did nothing. And so when Donald Trump, after they clear the riot, the insurrection out, Trump takes a photo with the Bible at St. John's Church, they nearly burned it down. Fortunately, firefighters were able to put the fire out. Then they said Trump attacked peaceful protesters for a photo op.
Yeah. The way they turned that narrative around was insane. And I agree with you about the Republicans and their failure to address this. It's almost like leftist violence has become so ubiquitous we're desensitized to it. After 2020, it's just we've kind of taken it for granted at this point that that's their MO. That's the way leftists get their stuff done, is through political violence. Whereas the crowd on January 6th, we're talking about the most law-abiding, peaceful people in the nation. I mean, these are people who own and build businesses, who have families, who have never done anything crazy like this. They're not agitators. The fact that even some of them were driven to this point, what the narrative should be is what pushed these normal people over the edge to this. What were they mad about?
Can I just, I want to ask something. Are you guys familiar with Broadway? Plays or anything like that? Are you theater?
I know of it. Yeah.
I just couldn't help but notice that on this promo that MSNBC has for the off-Broadway play, it says conceived and directed by Stephen Sachs. And I'm like, is it normal for people to plaster their name in Broadway? Because maybe it is, and I just don't know. Yeah. You think it is? Because I just kind of feel like it's funny. It just says a lot about a person who's like, I made this. It was me. Like
I wouldn't be putting my name on this. Yeah. well, they're making a movie too. Aaron Sorkin is scripting a movie about January 6th, which is hilarious to me. The West Wing guy.
What was that show? Newsroom or whatever?
Yeah, Newsroom with Jeff Daniels.
Having worked in newsrooms, I cannot. That show is so absolutely awful.
Just so melodramatic.
Yeah, it's just, oh my God, the garbage that Sorkin makes, where it's like, you really think this is what people think of these jobs now because of these shows. And I'm like, newsrooms are nothing like this. It's the stupidest thing ever.
Lionizing these journalists as if they're like these, they deeply care about the truth and what they're saying, and they're just hacks.
I had
a teleprompter.
It's not like so Newsroom dealt with a lot of big stories, but I can give you one really simple example of how these newsrooms operate, and it's not as important of a story, but it was when the movie Ghost in the Shell came out, and Scarlett Johansson was playing this character. She's white, and they said the character, who's the Major, that's the character's name. The character's a real name, but they call her the Major, is Japanese. And so, got a problem here.
Whitewashing.
And I'm actually a fan of Ghost in the Shell. And so during the editorial meeting, these young whippersnapper millennials are like, we actually have a story here because Scarlett Johansson is white. And it's an anime where the character is supposed to be Japanese. And so this is like whitewashing. And then on the call, I went, actually, like a big premise of Ghost in the Shell is that the mind transcends these things. And actually, the major is in a prosthetic body. So the idea of the show itself is that what makes you can be transferred to another body. So a lot of fans are actually praising that you have the story being a Japanese girl is nearly killed and they transfer her consciousness through cyberized nanites into a prosthetic body entirely.
It jives with the themes perfectly.
Yeah. And I was like, fans are actually praising this, saying this is an interesting way to spin it with a movie star. And then the editorial team just went, yeah, but we think white people, so we're gonna run the angle there. And I was like,
But white people are bad.
but white people are bad, and we want the clicks, and we want to accuse people of racism, so we're just gonna say it anyway. And I'm like, okay.
I think it's ridiculous because how many TV shows and movies do they cast people who are not gay as gay characters? Nick Offerman in The Last of Us. You couldn't find a single gay guy in Hollywood to play that role. You've got to take Ron Swanson from me. I was upset about that.
On purpose.
They do that. They did that with Captain America. That any kind of masculine, traditionally masculine cis character, eventually is going to have to pay his penance by playing a gay guy.
Cis?
Cis.
What is that? That sounds like a slur to me.
Yeah, Elon Musk is categorized it as a slur.
Yeah, you'll get flagged for community for hate.
Everyone says Heath Ledger offed himself because of playing the Joker. It was Brokeback Mountain.
Who's going to play you in the January 6th movie? That's what
Man. I mean, obviously someone who looks very much like me. I'm thinking Ryan Gosling.
Right.
Yeah.
Ryan Reynolds or something. We'll see.
Yeah. That's a good point. Someone will. You'll probably be cast as
John Krasinski played me on Saturday Night Live.
That's fantastic.
Wow.
Oh wait, I want to find that.
Oh, that's awesome.
That's great.
Crazy stuff.
You
Did they call him a lectern or his podium? Like, did they say it?
There were families sitting around a table game night or something, or a date night at someone's home, and the feds break in and they start arresting one person at a time because they were all at the Capitol. And Krasinski picks up a lectern from behind the couch and walks out with it. Hang on a second.
Okay, wait, is this it?
I think that is it, yeah.
Is it?
I think you know someone, and then this happens.
I know. Well, let's start the game, shall we?
Yeah. Oh, well, I bet that's the pizza.
All right, but hop to it, Angela, because we got a lot of pioneering to get through.
Okay, quit reminding us.
Angela Barnes, you're under arrest.
Okay, I know that.
Angela!
Not sweet racist Angela. It's true.
Can we talk about how
I'm a
SNL
patriot,
sucks
unlike
so
Mr.
bad? Oh, it's just so hard to watch.
It was worth it. I had sex with Chuck Norris. At least he told me
What?
he was Chuck Norris. He kept saying, "You still think I'm Chuck Norris, right?"
Okay.
Well, thank you for telling me the
Let
joke.
me just get my
It's so
stuff,
cringy.
please. Okay. Now, Uncle Jim says don't tread on this. Oh, wow.
It's so
Is anyone else freaked out that two of our friends just got arrested? Oh, no, not you too.
Dude, you know me better than that, okay? It's just the pizza guy.
Or is it?
Damn it.
Are you Keith Reynolds?
Yes, or Q Daddy on Facebook Marketplace.
Yeah, so we didn't get to see him carry the lectern, but
Oh, man.
I don't.
It's in the sketch.
Do you have a passport?
No, we don't care about whatever that is. Yeah. Oh, there he is. I mean, I think that was the right choice for actor for you.
I
mean,
think so as well.
Yeah, your imposing stature matches that of Krasinski.
It looks like one you made. Is that one?
It does look like one that I've made.
Do you have to pay Getty when you use your own photo?
No. No.
So,
I know if I want to use it for things, I have to pay for some type of rights to use it.
Yeah.
And I think it's like $5,000 for up to 1 million different sales or uses of it.
Just fair use it. All you got to do is put devil horns on yourself, and now it's transformative.
Just use our Babylon Bee version.
Can I make myself taller? Will that also?
So for those that missed this, there's a big part of the story that on, let me see if, when you look at photographs in newspapers, Getty Images is a large image repository that news organizations will license. So when they're using a photo on their website or newspaper, they have to include via Getty, meaning it came from Getty Images. What happened? Some journalists saw it say via Getty, and they assumed your name was via Getty.
Yes. So
Because these people are not very smart.
this is Twitter 1.0. These are the people who used to rule the world.
Wow.
Oh, was this like it was a trending thing, wasn't it?
It was actually. But they were like, who names their kid Via Getty? Like, no one. That's
Wow. You know what it is, though? I saw this post from J.D. Vance, and he had said something like, he's like, my two boys eat like 14 eggs a day. So, I got to, something. And some journalist, was it Stephanie Rule or whatever? I don't know her name. She was just like 14 eggs a day between two people. That's like 90 eggs a week. Do you really think people believe this? And J.D. Vance was like, I once said I could sleep all day, and they fact-checked me saying I sleep only 8 hours. Like, these people cannot understand. I know the NPC meme, it's meant to be a joke, but I genuinely wonder if these people have some kind of limited early stage AI for brains. It's like, do you not understand abstracts? They see Via Getty in an image and they're like, his name is Via Getty. It's like, did any of you think?
that study did come out where there are real NPCs. They do not have an internal monologue. They don't.
Well, it's true, but I've met people who are based who say they don't. And I've talked to people and asked them, like, you have no inner monologue, and they're like, I don't know what that means. I'm like, you don't think words? You don't like think in chains of thoughts of consciousness and language? And they're like, I see pictures and like images. And I was like, okay, well, they weren't woke and they seem to be answering my questions. So I don't want to immediately just assume that anybody who can't formulate, have an inner monologue is incapable of processes. I don't know.
I think NPCs are more like there are people who are more communal in nature. Like they like to be a part of something. You saw it with the masking. People were excited to mask up because they thought, like, I'm a part of something bigger than myself. And that's like people who are religious, people who believe in God are kind of more immune to that because we already have something that's actually meaningful that's bigger than ourselves. Those who don't are kind of looking for that, and so there's that sense to where the NPCs that go along with the crowd, you're kind of finding meaning in something bigger than yourself.
But it's the same mindset. It's the same NPC mindset of these mainstream journalists that are still on the J6 beat, that are still writing stories about it, still covering the trials. And they can't seem to find their way to realize that 99.9998% of the people that were there that day, weren't insurrectionists, weren't there for any other issue. There were only, by the Department of Justice own numbers, about 225 people that did violence. Now, they've charged more people with that because, you get them for aiding and abetting, or they were near it, or they touched the sign that was being passed over their head, rather than, it's just a normal response that you do. Something's coming over your head, you reach up. That person got charged with a felony.
Or someone's pushing you from behind, your hands go up to not fall over.
Yeah.
I think we all know the atrocities committed by Lectern Man over here.
Yes.
But what were you accused of doing?
I have been accused of glorified trespassing. That's the first one right there. Also, abusive language and abusive behavior, because before and after the event, when I was outside of the restricted areas, I said some things I didn't like. Like, for instance, in my hotel room that night afterwards in Virginia, I called Nancy Pelosi a bitch. And
that's it. Lock him up.
It's in my charging document. Something I said in my hotel room on a podcast that night with another journalist. We're watching television. So I get back. We pour, we're literally pouring an adult beverage. We've got the camera rolling. It's going live to YouTube, and I'm joking about what we're seeing on the television, which was allegedly somebody had stolen Pelosi's laptop. Right. So I said these words, and it's in my charging documents. God, I wish I'd taken that laptop. Can you imagine what I would have learned about the government? I'm an investigative journalist. I say that. They use those words against me, that I wish I had stolen Pelosi's laptop. Wow. And then I tell the story about when I went down the hallway into her office suite. So as I turned into and I've got my camera rolling the whole time. So I go into the office suite, and as soon as I see, and my camera frames up on actual damage in her office, tables flipped over, bookshelves are rifled, stuff's all over the floor. In my head, I went, I got to get the heck out of Dodge. This is because this is the first time I'd seen damage inside the Capitol. I don't need to be here. So I actually say that I said the word. Unfortunately, I saw damage in Pelosi's office. The word unfortunately. But I followed it up with, but it couldn't have happened to a more deserving bitch. and that ends up in my charging document.
Wow. You got charged with telling the truth.
Right.
Well, I suppose they put that towards intent or something, or motive.
Yes, that's correct. That is exactly what they're trying to frame. What your intentions are, your mental mindset of the day. It's a thought crime.
There was another. I believe this is part of your story. There's another journalist who had been basically in the same areas as you, was walking around with you, but his framing of everything was insurrection, bad, evil men. Yeah. And so no charges for him.
Yeah. Actually, Luke Mogelson, who submitted his story to the New Yorker, famously captured the cell phone camera video of the QAnon shaman praying in the Senate and doing all the things he did in the Senate chamber. Luke captured that, wrote the story, submitted it to the New Yorker, and the title of his story was "Among the Insurrectionists." Well, that was his get out of jail free card right there. But he actually went through a broken window before I did.
Wow.
Then you can see, because I had access to all the Capitol CCTV, so I didn't have to wait on discovery from the government to get all the video of me in the Capitol. I already had it. And not only that, but even though it's marked sensitive or highly sensitive, which would mean I can't release it unless it's used in a trial, I had received it directly from Speaker Johnson.
Wow.
So I was able to release the entire 37 minutes of me inside the Capitol, and it shows me behaving better than most of the journalists that were there that day. I wasn't parading. I wasn't wearing any political attire, no Trump gear or anything like that. You see me actually getting and moving away from the crowd, videotaping above and away, and then stopping on occasion to actually take notes, setting my backpack, my tripod down and taking notes. And so all of this is now. So what they try to do, as you said, Tim, is they try to frame the intent of my insurrectionism by words I said before and afterwards.
That's insane.
But what they're not doing is they're not going after the other. No, we've cataloged right now somewhere between 80 and 100 other journalists, freelancers, stringers, independents, social media influencers, podcasters, including actual employees of major media companies who entered a restricted space. Now, just because you work for the New York Times or just because you have a badge, a press pass of any kind, that does not give you the legal right to enter a restricted space unless you're given express permission to do so by law enforcement. So anybody, especially a journalist, Journalism 101, first year in journalism school, no, you cannot enter a taped off, police area. Your press pass does not give you permission to do that. But somewhere in between 80 and 100 did do that, but the only ones who have been charged so far are the ones, and there's a handful of us.
Colbert's people did that, I think.
Yeah, with Triumph the Insult Comic Dog. They tried to get into Nancy Pelosi's office or something, didn't they?
Well, they were there after hours when it was closed or something like that, and they were like walking around where they weren't supposed to be unescorted, and nobody cared. The argument they made, because Colbert actually addressed this, was we weren't there to protest, we're just walking around, and it's like, okay, so get charged with trespass.
Well, is it illegal or not? Is pulling a fire alarm illegal or not? There should be a standard of justice across the board.
Don't you besmirch the name of Jamal Bowman. He thought that fire alarm opened the door. Isn't that what he said? He thought the fire alarm would unlock the door?
Yeah, but he knew better because he removed the two signs.
Mm-hmm. No. He thought that if he pulled the lever, the doors would fly open and those signs could go whipping out into the air, injuring someone. So he politely took them down before opening the door.
Maybe he just did a lot of escape rooms and he's like, there's a secret way to get out this way. I got to move a couple signs around.
No, but that was the legal. If we're going to talk about the legal side of it, is that the government is deliberately ignoring 100 other individuals, allegedly press of some sort, of some type, that entered a restricted space. So we have actually on the table right now. We should probably hear within the week. We have a motion to dismiss my case based on selective prosecution.
Wow,
beautiful.
And then not only is it very well written, very well presented to the judge to rule upon, but even if he rules against it, which we expect him to do, it's about a 50-50 chance that because in the motion we demand that the government provide for us the discovery on that 100 journalists.
Fantastic.
Oh.
And that will piss them off. And they will not have time to provide that discovery in the next 4 to 5 weeks before my trial.
But they can the judge deny you that discovery?
Yes, he can absolutely deny it. And they have given me a plea offer. We just got that a couple of weeks ago. And
are you allowed to say what it is? Or
yeah, it's public. They have offered me the opportunity rather to plea down to the glorified trespassing charge, which is entering and remaining in a restricted space, as my single and only charge. Now, in a plea offer, they do not tell you what your punishment will be.
Nope.
For taking the plea.
Right.
It's just assumed based on the comparatives that I'd probably get 2 years probation and a large fine.
Oh, so not prison for 3 months?
Well, for instance, you get the trial. You get the trial punishment if you go to trial.
Yeah, but I mean,
I took a plea deal. I went to prison for 3 months for that charge.
Right.
Yes, but I mean, how could you even compare the hardworking journalism of Steve to your atrocity of taking?
You touched the sacred lectern.
You lifted a lectern up and then put it down.
My judge was mostly pissed off that I was smiling. He could not wrap his head around. How are you smiling? And I was like, well, I just don't like the government.
But see, I've had. Go ahead.
Quick question: is it possible that if you accept this plea agreement, the judge could say, like, you're going to say you're guilty in exchange for this plea down? Is it possible the judge just says, sure, I don't care, I'm throwing the book at you?
Absolutely, 100%. Wow. No, the single charge, they can put me in prison for up to 12 months and multi-$1,000 fine. Now, they've increased the fines now, as you've probably been following here, is that over the last year especially, these people who have had the Give, Send, Go accounts, and they've been raising money for not only their legal fees, but also, in many cases, just to keep their mortgage because they've lost their jobs. Some of these guys have been have been held in pretrial detention. They've raised as much as $250,000 for their legal defense funds and paying their mortgage, that kind of thing, while dad's in prison, those kinds of things. Well, now the courts are fining these people that amount of money which they raised. This is evil. Whoa. This is evil. So if they raised $50,000 or raised $250,000 through their Give, Send, Go, that's their fine. Now, what
are they publicly stating it's because you raised the money?
Absolutely.
They're saying you raised all this money, we're taking it from you.
They're showing what you were how you benefited essentially from your charge or from your crime. So you've benefited this much from your crime, so that's what your fine is going to be. So that's why even in my plea deal, we anticipate a very, very stiff penalty because they're going to argue you were an independent at the time, and since then you've been hired by the Blaze. You've been financially remunerated for your crime. Wow! And so your fine, they're actually thinking my fine could be as high as $100,000.
Wow, that's insane.
Whereas Ray Epps got $500 fine.
Mm-hmm. $500.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, all he did was tell people to go into the Capitol over and over again.
He also had his hands on the sign that was being pushed into cops.
So which other people got a felony for? He didn't.
Yeah.
But was it possible that he was trying to adhere to the sign like Spider-Man to pull it away from the police?
It's possible. Feds work in mysterious ways.
Do you know what I was shocked about, though? To find out that there were people being sent to prison who weren't even there that day.
Oh, I mean, look at
Enrique Tarrio.
Yeah. He's not even allowed to be in the city, and they're like 20 years.
Yeah,
that's insane.
22 years he got, and of course we were talking about it this morning in the lobby at the hotel. Was you have a guy like Stuart Rhods, who I'm somewhat obsessed with his story, because if ever anybody was sentenced to a multi-decade sentence for a thought crime, it was Stuart Rhods. 9 different FBI agents in his trial testified under cross-examination that they never were able to find either written or verbal evidence of orders for the Oath Keepers to enter the Capitol, stop the certification, attack Congress, blah, 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 blah. They also proved absolutely conclusively that the only thing that Stuart Rhodes was guilty of was words that he said before he got to the Capitol and words that he said after he left the Capitol. He never went inside the building. 18 years.
Yeah. And Joe Biggs as well, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What he got a couple decades? Is that what happened?
Yeah, I can't remember exactly what was he.
He was
20
there.
years?
He was there. He actually, I think, he was in the building more so. But Enrique Tarrio wasn't even in the place. And they said, well, he posted on Parler or something. Don't leave.
Yeah.
I think Biggs had additional charges that happened after January 6th. They tagged on. They found, I think, a grenade or something in his home and some classified documents. But I mean,
well, Stuart Rhods was calling for the president to invoke the Insurrection Act. He had written 2 open letters to President Trump to do that. And he said, if you will do that, my 35,000 Oath Keepers will defend the White House. We will come armed and we will defend the White House. Now,
like a well-regulated militia?
Right. So Trump did not. Stuart Rhodes and the Oath Keepers did not. So there's no crime. And then a week later, a FBI CHS is secretly taping Stuart Rhodes, who is drunk in a parking lot in Dallas outside of a restaurant. And Rhodes says these words, "I wish I'd taken my rifle and put a bullet through Nancy Pelosi's head."
Jeez.
Now, he said that. And that's a horrible thing to say. But he said, "I wish I had." But he didn't. There's no crime in that statement whatsoever. But when you put those 2 things, you bookend both of those in front of a D.C. jury.
Your average leftist on Twitter says 10 times worse every day.
Absolutely.
Elected representatives wishing for
almost-
Trump's death.
But when
It's
the
almost as bad as
DC
holding up a decapitated effigy of Trump's head.
Yeah, but the D.C. jury pool is 95.5% Biden voters, right? That's the number. And so you put the bookend of what Stuart Rhodes said before and after January 6th on the screens, as they did in a multimedia psyop in that trial.
You paint a picture of a monster.
That's exactly what they did.
What I love about all this, did you guys see, and you've got this experience with your film coming up, but did you see the MSNBC interview of union workers? No. And they've got a panel of these guys, and they walk up and they say, "How do you feel about January 6th?" And the guy goes, "What?" And they're like, and then one guy's like, "Yeah, I think I remember that." And she's like, "Does this matter to you for the election?" And he's like, "No." People don't know or care. The Democrats have turned this into a off-Broadway play.
Yeah.
And most people are going to be like, huh?
That's what was funny about the movie. We went to D.C., we went to other places throughout the country, and we did kind of like man on the street type things where we just went up to people, "Hey, where were you on January 6th? What, and people are like, same,
one
left, right, and center. Everyone's like, what? What's January 6th? No one cares. We also went around D.C. and we asked everyone where the January 6th memorial was. Can you point us to the January 6th memorial? No one could tell us. So we built our own in the National Mall. We built this little stone that says, "Don't forget to remember January 6th." And then we played music and we saluted it and stuff like that. But it really, I mean, no one knows, no one cares. This is all like a fiction that kind of just lives in the minds of these journalists and these leftists, and they're shocked when people don't. It doesn't register with people.
You remember that podcast? I think it still exists. Mueller, She Wrote.
Yeah.
You know what I think this is that when Donald Trump got elected, there was a collective brain shattering among many Democrats and liberals who were so sure that Hillary was going to win. And so these are people who are obsessed with mystery, crime, drama, wine mom types. And they were given that narrative. They were given that soap opera drama, and they wanted season 1, season 2, season 3. They are living in a paranoid, delusional state where they want their life to be a movie. I'm sorry, life is substantially more boring than movies. That's why we go pay to see movies, because they're intentionally crazier. Mm-hmm. So when they hear these stories, the January 6th, they're sitting there eating popcorn and be like, "Whoa, what happened next?" And they're getting the committee in D.C. Jamie Raskin, he's 20 minutes from here, 30 minutes from here, represents some of the people who work at this company as their rep, because we're next door to his district. He does this whole thing on the J6 committee where he's like, these are people who are advocating for January 6th. And in it, one of the clips he plays is me reading an article at Fox News being like, Donald Trump says the protest is going to be wild on January 6th. And I was like, wow, I think Trump might be right. And that's it. And he's saying that I'm advocating for something. And I was like, well, I read a Fox News article, dude, chill. This is the whole game they were playing the whole time, is to drum all this nonsense up, lie, cheat, and steal. Well, I ended up writing an op-ed being like, I literally just read a news article 3 months before January, where Fox News reported Trump says the protests will be wild.
Mm-hmm.
And now they're trying to reframe the past to make it seem like there was a conspiracy. Well, these wine moms want their soap opera drama.
You hit the nail on the head with wanting to be in a movie. There's this tendency on the left that I see it everywhere. This tendency to kind of want to mythologize our reality. You see it with Ukraine. You know that Russia's Darth Vader and Ukraine is Luke Skywalker. Voldemort. I mean, even Brian, who's the second Trump assassin, Brian something.
Ryan Ruth.
Ryan Ruth. Just reading what he wrote and hearing what he said. It's like he fancies himself as being Harry Potter or Luke Skywalker, and when you like have that delusion that you are the hero in this myth, you know, assassinating Trump isn't a deranged act of a killer. It's you're fighting Voldemort, you're fighting Darth Vader.
I mean, the joke we like to bring up, many people do, is what is the story of Star Wars and Luke Skywalker? It is a kid who lives on a desert planet, who is radicalized by an old religious man who lives in a cave, and then he gets a cargo ship with some smugglers, and they blow up a military base.
Yeah, he's like the Taliban.
But that's the funny thing. I mean, Disney loves Star Wars, and they try to capitalize on it. And then a lot of people might be like, well, but Darth Vader was evil and all that stuff. And it's like, yeah, but the joke is, the framing of the story can go in either direction depending on how you want to look at it. He blew up a military base. Darth Vader was a disabled war veteran who was commanding a military of the Republic. And I will stress this. Tell me when in any of the Star Wars movies you see the Emperor do something wrong.
Yeah, well, and that's a huge misunderstanding of the purpose of myth on the left, is that, you know, people like Luke Skywalker and Harry Potter, they're Christ figures. That's what myth is for. It points us to Christ, and when you put yourself in that place instead of what it's supposed to be portraying, it gives you license to do all kinds of horrible things. Yeah, it's Satanism.
Satanism is not the worship of Satan. It is the belief that you are essentially the supreme entity of reality, that you can do what you want. There are rules to Satanist doctrine about, you know, don't harm others and things like this. But the core tenet is you live for yourself and for your pleasures with some restriction.
So just hedonism.
Yeah,
basically. And that's why
and your truth is the narrative that you make. That's why they put so much into making these narratives, because they believe that they can speak reality into existence, you know. But
the dissonance over time has got to just be, I think that's probably what's melting minds. You start telling yourself things that are just obviously not true, and when you're presented facts, realities, you just, how do you deal with that? These people have brain rot.
Well, when Donald Trump came down that escalator, heads were exploding. Since then, we are now looking at 9 years. As they say, every 7 years, every cell in your body has been replaced, and you are a new being. You are the ship of Theseus. That means there are people who are, and every cell, every fiber of their being has been built in the mythos of Hitler Trump.
Ooh, that's scary.
Yep. How do you rewire a brain that's been completely constructed around that narrative?
I think outside forces working their way in. How many times do you have to go grocery shopping before you figure out things aren't better?
I am so pissed off with them constantly saying the economy is good.
Yeah.
Nate Silver, I was reading the news the other day, and he's like, the economy is good, but it's not great. And I'm just like, have you been to the grocery store lately? I was just talking to Allison earlier, and I was mentioning that we got 3 bags of groceries. It was 1 blueberry, 1 blackberry, 2 things of raspberries, 2 coconut milks. I don't even know what we got. Some toaster strudels, and it was $130.
Yep.
And I was looking at the shop. I was looking at a shopping cart, and I was like, "Did we get meat? No, we got no meat. It was just I was like, I need to pick up some coconut milk for my protein shakes. $130, and they keep telling me everything's fine. Go back to sleep, America."
I told you this last time. My monthly grocery bill is $3,000. I have 5 kids. 4 teenagers.
That's what mine is. Yeah.
So it's like
$3,000
a month. It's almost twice my mortgage.
I think it's almost tripled in the last 6 years.
Have you considered getting chickens?
We do have chickens.
There we go.
We have 18 chickens.
Yes.
Wow. Yeah.
And so are they laying every day?
They're some of them are kind of falling off. We need to get some more, but we're getting a good dozen eggs a day.
I'll tell you a trick. It's you put a rooster in there, and they will make more of themselves.
Yeah. See, that's what we're trying to get ready for Asheville, North Carolina to happen in Ohio. So we have food.
Everybody knows I'm a big chicken fan because Chickens are a birthright and a human tradition, and they make food for you.
My
and
wife,
they are food themselves.
My wife is her family's immigrants from Germany. Their last name means chicken keeper in German, so
That
it's
is
like in her blood.
That is the best last name ever.
Yeah.
Chicken keeper. There's a really funny meme where a guy's talking about it's a 4chan post, and he's just like bored and depressed. Work sucks. One day, neighbor gets chickens. I wake up to hearing clucking and funny sounds, and I look out the window and I watch them, and I just start laughing. And then all of a sudden, I feel better, and now I look forward to wake up in the morning and watching them do their chicken thing. We're out here in the country, so people just let their chickens out. They've got these automatic doors on the chicken coops that when the sun comes up, it opens, and you'll walk down the street and there's just chickens crossing the road, and they just do whatever they want.
You have problems with predators? Because we have owls and chicken hawks and
oh yeah, but
foxes
people out here don't care, I guess.
They just replace them.
Get a good rooster or something. Yeah. Anyway, back to real news. Self-sufficiency is important right now because things are being run into the ground, costs are through the roof, and the chicken joke, though it is only half joking, is more about what are you doing to be self-sufficient as the machine in the corporate press. You know, I view it as some kind of like Lich King. It is an undead monster of an economy trying to tell you that the system is fine and to bow before it. And these people that follow it are zombified by it's actually quite creepy.
Look at the response too from FEMA after this hurricane. You want to tell me the government's in a good place right now? We can't even help our own citizens. FEMA is basically bankrupt, and hurricane season goes through November 30th.
Yeah, they said that, what do they have, no more money for hurricanes? Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, someone had to pay all those illegal immigrants to settle in this country.
You can't look at these things. So the idea is that the hurricane went through a bunch of rural counties, a bunch of like red counties, but it's at Asheville that really got demolished. That's a blue county. Yeah. How are those people going to respond to this? Because are they going to look at the government's being run the way it is and say, you know what, I want more of this. I just lost everything. Thanks for the $750.
Trump should get up at this rally tomorrow, and he should say, one of the first things I will do is an executive order to reallocate funding from foreign intervention and war towards the victims of Hurricane Helene and make sure that you get what you need. Talk to me. Mm-hmm. He's going to win over those counties instantly, and their friends and their families.
Easy win.
There's nothing going to happen before the election, though, because there's 25 affected counties in western North Carolina. Only 2 of those are blue counties, and that's the problem. And this
How are they going to vote?
And this is, I mean, this I should have wrote this for the B, but I tweeted out the other day that, in fact, Democrats should not be opposed to us going out in North Carolina and handing out and harvesting ballots to all these people, disaffected or, as I said, disenfranchised by a climate change event. So they shouldn't have any objections to that. Yeah. But that's exactly the problem. And I will tell you, because I'm technically a resident of North Carolina, although I'm never there. I spend 90% of my life in hotel rooms elsewhere. But the reality is that I'm very close to what's going on. I will be relocating there next week. As a matter of fact, I'll basically be moving into someplace in western North Carolina to cover what the government is and isn't doing there. But one of the things that I'm in touch with right now are the political operatives, GOP particularly, and what they're watching, what they're doing, and they are on it. And they're well aware that Governor Cooper and the Biden administration, Harris campaign in particular, are very, very much not wanting any relief right now to those counties, because relief means those people will get access to services. Access to services means they'll get their hands on ballots. And we're talking about...
That sounds like an attack on democracy to me.
All they need is, 15, 20,000 vote differential, and they win North Carolina, and it's over.
Yeah.
Buttigieg came out and said, stop flying drones.
Yeah.
People are trying to rescue people.
It's worse than it.
Neighbors are trying to rescue neighbors.
That's what's so wicked about this. The fact that they, neighbors helping neighbors, people helping people. Whenever these disasters strike, we always see kind of this swell of humanity, and you kind of, partisan bonds are broken, and it's always kind of inspiring. We've seen it in past hurricanes. That just the idea that the government is going to come in and say, no, you're not going to help your neighbor. Your only bond should be with the government. It's so demonic and backwards that they would do this to people.
The first boots on the ground up there were former special forces operatives. providing relief. They're bringing in their helicopters,
like Oath Keepers.
That's what the Oath Keepers were known for.
Yeah.
For years, were doing disaster relief operations.
Yeah.
And that's what they were known for.
A good buddy of mine, Mr. Gunsinger, his name is Mike. Big gun tuber. This guy was, I think, in the Navy 20 years, Special Forces, but he's actually up there bringing in supplies. These are the heart of our communities.
So this just happened. So FEMA finally gets there, yesterday or the day before, and they've got their truck. It's not a truck full of supplies. It's their satellite vehicle with all their forms so that they can start signing people up for assistance and getting their $750. All right. So they pull into this big parking lot up there in Asheville, where the special forces have for a week already been delivering needed medicines, insulin, things like that, actual providing life-saving help to people. Now, they've been doing this for a week. FEMA representative walks over to the tent and says, "What are you guys doing?" They said, "Well, we've got medicines, insulin we're providing." And they said, "Do you have a permit for that?" And they said, what do you mean a permit? They said, "Well, you can't do this if you don't have a permit." And you know what the special ops guys did? Said,
"Screw you.
You F off, go back to your truck.
Yeah,
we're not leaving, and you're not making us leave."
The Appalachian people, they beat to a different drum. Yeah. And if FEMA continues to be FEMA and the government, they're going to find out why the Appalachian people are the Appalachian people. I heard also that they are pulling out survivors from wreckage, homeless people, and they're trying to put them up in hotels. FEMA has come in and booked entire hotels. So government employees are staying in places that people who just lost everything should be staying.
I just hope people vote against this. I hope they see what's going on. Trump was down there immediately. What did Kamala waited a week?
Well, she got there quicker than the border, so.
I think the big story is, we talked about this last night on IRL, that $640 million spent on rehousing and settling illegal immigrants from FEMA. So now their budget is strapped and they won't have any money for another hurricane, and they're only giving $750 anyway. Now, the argument the fact checkers make is that's always been the cap. It's not Kamala's fault, and it's like,
that's not true.
You're not going to make, but regardless, you're not going to give hundreds of billions of dollars to Ukraine and then say, well, we aren't able to help Americans that are suffering for whatever reason it is.
Hurricane Katrina, almost 20 years ago, the average given out in checks for FEMA was almost $2,000. They also flew people out to Texas and a few other states and housed them there as well. Mm-hmm. So $2,000 20 years ago is about $3,700 now.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Well, the one thing I can say is, FEMA giving $500 million to illegal immigrants means that the illegal immigrant border crisis is a federal emergency. And maybe that's the narrative we can go for now with there is a border crisis. The federal government's basically declared the illegal immigration to this country a federal emergency, warranting $500 million in funding.
Yeah, no kidding. It's going back to this idea of an attack on democracy in January 6th, just the idea that a few hundred people walking around the Capitol was the gravest attack on democracy that our country has ever seen, while they're ushering in illegals by the millions, is just insane. And the fact that people can still live in that narrative and believe it is, and the response from Republicans has been disgraceful too. The fact that, Marjorie Taylor Greene and My Pillow guy Mike Lindell are like the only people out there speaking for these detained political prisoners, and the rest of the kind of like the respectable Republican class, they're like, I don't want to touch that. That's a little controversial. I don't want to look like I'm against law enforcement or I'm standing up for dangerous insurrectionists. It's really, I think the kind of the normie Republican set needs to wake up to the kind of government we're dealing with here.
It says a lot when you have to rely on a pillow salesman for strength and leadership.
Yeah.
And with all due respect to Mike Lindell, he sacrificed so much. Mm-hmm. And to this day, they're having a hard go of it. Their latest commercial is talking about how another big box retailer has just canceled their products.
I actually, I'm going to disagree. I think that being in politics, you're supposed to be a public servant. They should be people selling pillows, selling cars, just doing regular jobs. Those should be our politicians, people who are actually a part of us and live our lives.
Yes. No, I agree. I agree. And that's kind of the point. We look to our politicians, but the politicians we elect are people who are like, look, I'm on the phone to raise money, not to serve the American people. Yep. And it is the pillow salesman who says, I will put everything I have on the line to serve the American people.
Mm-hmm. I will tell you a story. So my wife is a part of a group called PMORS. It is Physicians Moms on the Right. And they got together. They went out to an event to go see a congressperson. I won't say who it is. And they flew out there, went to this event, this gala, and they had a nice sit-down chat with them. And he said, listen, I mean, I would love to do this for you, but your money would have been better spent if you just donated to my campaign. You actually might have gotten something done.
Wow.
Wow.
That is their response.
Yep. They spend all the time on the phone fundraising. Marjorie Taylor Greene came on IRL and mentioned and told us this, and I didn't know this, that when they're supposed to be voting on bills, there's like 4 Democrats, 4 Republicans, and there's some parliamentarian who's not the speaker saying, we got a bill here, and they go, we'll say it's passed, bang. And so Marjorie, Thomas Massey, and others started going in and demanding floor votes on all of these bills. Yep. And this is why they hate her and the other Freedom Caucus members, because they're on the phone in their office fundraising, and now they're being called to Congress to vote, and they normally don't have to do it because they are lazy and they don't want to. Right. Well, I take that back. Lazy is the wrong word for someone who grinds their hands to the bone fundraising.
Yeah.
They are more so less inclined to do public service and just try and keep the position in office.
Yeah.
For what reason? I have no idea.
You said something a moment ago about law enforcement. The MAGA are supposed to be supporters of law enforcement, and we have through the Blaze we have shown that we have some federal officers who have perjured themselves in these January 6th trials.
Capitol Police.
Yeah, Capitol Police officers, including the guy that was on January 6th, the head of Nancy Pelosi's dignitary protection detail. And so this is irrefutable. I mean, we have them dead to rights. I mean, we have the video evidence. We have everything. Well, just yesterday when we released another one of our videos in this series about the Capitol Police, it's called A Day in the Life of Harry Dunn, Part 1. And when we released that yesterday, one of the first things that you start seeing up in our Twitter threads is that, I thought MAGA was supposed to love cops. You guys hate cops. And I'm like, you realize that it's the good guys at the Capitol Police who are working with us on this. Mm-hmm. And I can assure you right now, there's 2,000 uniformed Capitol Police that are cheering this video because those guys who perjured themselves in trials made them look bad.
Yep. Well, not to mention, when people were entering the Capitol on January 6th, police officers were taking selfies with them and shaking their hands. Yeah. There's one guy, you probably know his name. He's on camera speaking with the officers, asking them what they can do to assist the officers with getting people out, and then try getting people to leave. And I think they put him in prison, didn't they?
If I don't know that particular incident, but there are many incidents where that took place. And in fact, and let's go ahead and just dispel one rumor, and I know I get in trouble every time I do this. No Capitol Police officer actually opened the outside doors for protesters. That did not happen. I've been in the CCTV viewing room more than any other journalist on the planet. I have seen and I've watched the actual breaching of every door. It was protesters that breached every single door. There were 7 of them that they breached. Having said that, after they were breached and the numbers were overwhelming, some of the Capitol Police did hold the doors open.
And there was the officer who said, I don't agree with it, but I respect it.
That's correct. Or they said, I don't agree with what's going on right now, but you guys, don't, tear the place up. There was these kinds of conversations, and the conversation like the one that you just mentioned there of what can we do for you. There was
there is an interior door that's on camera being held open by an officer,
correct.
And then protesters come in, I think, in front of the officer or something like that.
Yep. And there's several examples of that.
Yeah.
Look, they opened the doors for Chansley into the Senate.
They guided him to the Senate and said, let us help you get there. And he walks by.
That was the funniest video.
Yeah.
He's got like 3 cops around him. They walk past like 7 cops, and they go to the door and they open it, and they say, here you are, sir. Yeah. And he's like, thank you.
I got carrying a spear,
My favorite was when the police officer comes in and he's like, hey guys, just so this is the sacredest place.
Yeah.
Like, can we file out of here? And they're like, okay, brother, no problem. It was all very civil.
A guy with a rubber bullet stuck in his cheek.
Yeah.
And the cop, you need to think of, no, I'm good.
So you can't pray in the Senate chamber, but you can definitely film yourself.
Whoa. Yeah.
Oh,
right?
yeah. Mm-hmm.
That was an insurrection right there.
Yeah, no kidding.
So for those that don't know, there was he got fired for this, but who was he working for? The staffer? So working for a Democrat in the Senate, I think, and he filmed himself. And the rumor is we've seen one video go viral where these 2 male staffers are basically insulting baby Jesus in this, and defiling the seat of our government. And the rumor is he's done it more than once. That they had been doing this frequently, and only one of them got posted. So
I'll bet it happens all the time.
Doesn't shock
God
me.
knows
No, it's
what happens in the Capitol building. Oh.
I can't even begin to.
Madison Cawthorn tried
relay
warning us.
the stories
Yep,
of
I
that,
remember
right.
this. Remember
Yeah.
this.
that we're aware
Crack
of.
orgies.
Yeah. And but that's
You think they're more
It's
or
in
less
line with what
wild
they
than a
want.
Diddy party?
more wild.
More wild, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, when I heard that he had 1,000 bottles of baby oil, I was like, he's got nothing in Congress.
That's like a Tuesday.
Well, and that's the rumored, and I guess we can throw rumors out here on this show maybe, but
I am pregnant, yes.
Kamala Harris was not where she was supposed to be on January 6th either. We all knew about that,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
She was actually at the DNC. She was scheduled 2 days in advance. This is in the Secret Service logging, their book records, is that it was a known fact that she was going to be at the DNC headquarters from 11:30 to 3:30. Now, the debate and the vote at the Capitol on her, coronation as, vice president is taking place. She's a sitting voting senator. She is the VP elect, and she has chosen not to be where the vote is taking place. Now, why is that?
I heard a crazy story just when I was at Rescue the Republic. I spoke with a Capitol police officer. I'm not sure if he was a former, but there's another officer who, and you probably know this. You probably know the story. He took it upon himself to evacuate members of Congress, and then he got in trouble because they did not want him to do that.
I was on the phone with him last night.
Wow.
So can you break down the story for us?
Yeah, that's Lieutenant Tarek Johnson.
Yeah.
He was calling in he actually, start from the beginning here, his job that day, he was in charge of interior security of the entire Capitol building. That was his job as the lieutenant inside. You can hear his voice on the radio comms, Capitol Police radio comms, calling in for assistance early on in the battle. He's trying to set up decontamination tents for the officers that are getting hit with bear spray. He's calling for, water to be brought in to assist the officers in that regard. He then calls in the what they call the M4 units, the guys that are actually carrying the long rifles, the automatic weapons, because he says we don't want the he actually says these words. He says, we're not going to use deadly force. We need the M4 units to come in because we can't risk them being taken by protesters, the automatic rifles. So you see all the M4 units start coming in right about 1 o'clock or right about 2 o'clock. And so once it was absolutely apparent that they were going to be breached, he started calling in to headquarters, to the command center, to the officers or the chiefs, the assistant chiefs in control up there. We need help. What do we do? I need directions. I need to know. And there's silence. Total silence coming from the command center. No direction, no orders whatsoever. So he literally says on the radio, he says, I'll take the 550 and the 534. Those are like two documents, disciplinary documents. He said, I'll take both disciplinary actions, but I am evacuating the Senate now. You can hear him. We have a clear path out. Boom. And he does it. He takes it upon himself. He evacuates the Senate. 8 minutes later, he runs down once he's verified, and you can hear it all on the radio. Once it's verified that everybody's out of the Senate and he's safe, he runs to the House and starts the evacuation of the House. So he has embarrassed command now because he's taken the lead and probably done something they didn't anticipate, something that was not supposed to happen.
The implication, I suppose, is they wanted members of Congress in those buildings to be confronted by, at the very least, the rioters on that day.
That's exactly what they wanted.
The photos of members of the Senate being shoved or yelled at, whatever it may have turned into.
Yeah.
And so I wonder, someone asked me, because we were talking at the Republic event backstage, well, why would they discipline him? Like why wouldn't they just tell him no? And because they don't want to be on the record in recording saying stand down.
Okay, I have his entire OPR. That's the disciplinary report. And I acquired that actually before I ever met him. And I've known him for almost 2 years now. Well, almost exactly 2 years now. And again, his name is former Lieutenant Tarek Johnson. And the one thing that he did that he became famous for was there was 16 officers calling in a distress call over the radio. It's all there. I have the radio comms. And when they called in the distress call, he got on there and said, okay, we need, because they knew that FBI and ATF SWAT teams were in the building. And he calls for FBI, ATF to come over there and help get those guys out. No response. He even tells them exactly where he is outside waiting for them, for the SWAT teams to come. They don't respond. You can hear him on the radio say, basically, fuck it, I'll do it. He's the guy that took the MAGA hat.
Wow.
Actually, a protester put the MAGA hat on. He didn't ask for one. Protester put the MAGA hat on him. He saw it and realized, this is my pass through the crowd. This is the Passover, symbol for me to get through the crowd. So he is looking for now, again, it's on the radio comms. He's looking for a bullhorn. I need a bullhorn. Somebody give me a bullhorn. He's calling on the radio. I need a cop to deliver me a bullhorn to such and such place. He couldn't get it. He says it again. Fuck it. I'll get one. And he goes and finds one himself from a protester. So then, as he's trying to get help, two guys standing next to him say, what do you need? Officer, what do you need? I'm former law enforcement myself. And shows him his badge. He's retired, so they carry those cards and everything. And he says, yeah, I've got 16 distressed officers in. I need to go get them out. And they go, oh, we're Oath Keepers. We'll help you. So one of them, 20 years law enforcement, former military as well, gets in front. He takes the bullhorn. He puts Tarek Johnson, Lieutenant Johnson, in the middle. The other Oath Keeper gets behind him. They go up the stairs through the crowd, announcing to the crowd, clear the way, clear the way. We're Oath Keepers. We're here to rescue somebody. The crowd goes, oh, Oath Keepers, they're the good guys. They're known as the good guys. They do disaster relief projects. They do security all over the country at riots, all over the country. They protect minority businesses in Louisville, in Minneapolis, in Ferguson. This is what the Oath Keepers do. They don't attack cops. And so they go up the stairs. They lead the 16 officers out. One lady hugs every one of them as they come out. Their people are high-fiving the officers as they bring them down the steps, led by a Capitol police officer with a MAGA hat on. So he gets suspended 3 days later, loses his job. He is placed on mandatory. Now, you can't believe that they can do this. They put him on home detention.
What?
For 17 months. He could not leave his house during workout. So his job, because if you're a job or your shift is a 7 to 3 or 7 to 4 shift, he was in home confinement during his job hours for 17 months.
Could he quit?
They were fighting. I mean, obviously they were fighting the process, and what ended up happening is when they did the disciplinary review on him, all of the disciplinary action is from 3 o'clock till he rescues. So they actually disciplined him for rescuing those officers. They claimed that he endangered them, but everything that he did heroically from 1 o'clock to 3 o'clock, not a word of it is in the disciplinary report, because that's where he embarrassed them, and that's where he countered their
so vile
plan.
I think it's fairly obvious that Trump called for National Guard. They deny it. There were people, there are videos where people at the Capitol are saying to the police, stop this. Why aren't you stopping this? And the cops are just standing there. Yep. And so I think it's fairly obvious. The simple solution is they didn't want an evacuation.
They wanted a Reichstag fire.
Yeah.
Yes.
I don't want to go as far as to say that they wanted anyone to get hurt, but they wanted that photo of a member of Congress terrified as a guy screaming at him.
I actually believe they did. They
wanted him hurt?
I believe that they anticipated that some of these MAGA yahoos were going to use their weapons that day.
Wow.
All they needed was a couple of rounds fired at a couple of U.S. Capitol police officers, possibly seriously injured or killed, and we would have lost the Second Amendment as a result.
Can you imagine the Patriot Act coming out of that?
Right. But considering none of these guys did any of that against police officers or the staffers who were there, I don't believe that they would have got, like, members of Congress would have been injured or anything like that or harmed by the people who are rioting. I think it would have been confrontational and raucous. But under your view of it, should he, Tarek, not have evacuated members of Congress, and the assumption from the machine state was that these guys would have injured members of Congress, you would have gotten Patriot Act not times 2, but times 10.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And
the Capitol would be surrounded by barricades, triple layer thick, and they would never remove them.
that is what they wanted. It's why the National Guard was denied. And of course, we just did a story. We interviewed he actually went on the record. I met him months ago. He finally went on the record just a couple of weeks ago. And this was after the new IG report came out about the National Guard. And what he came on the record for, Casey Wardensky, former Assistant Secretary of the Army, appointed by Trump, 30 years in the Army, teaches at West Point. He was also the chief economist of the Pentagon. So this guy knows the Pentagon. He's in the Pentagon that day on January 6th. He gets a call. He says, we need to use your telecom system because we're going to have all the generals on here because there's something going on at the Capitol. So he gets on. So he's actually on the telecom system with 2 3-star generals, 4-star general, and the National Guard commanders. That was on that call where they birthed the phrase, "We don't like the optics." And so on that call, the National Guard guys are saying, "No, our guys are armed. They're kitted up. They're ready to go. Yep. We're blocks away. We can be there in 15 minutes. Blah 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 blah." And the Pentagon pukes, the 3- and 4-star general said, "No, we don't like the optics."
You know, it would be really funny if maybe a lot of people do believe this, but under the presumption that there was a plot that Democrats were saying, look, if these people do show up, we want them to run amok. It would be funny if the whole plan was just ruined, and that's why the January 6th committee was absurd, why the narratives don't make sense, is because they have this plan. They're like, okay, after the MAGA people go in there and some senators and members of Congress are attacked or whatever happens, and we have all these photos, we're going to have these committee hearings, and we're going to go for years, and we will arrest Trump, and we're going to shut it all down. And then you end up with this half right on one side, people milling about on the other. They keep trying to lie and claim that cops died on that day. They're trying really hard, but it's not true. They have these big hearings, and it's just guys, no one knows or cares. It was a bad riot. We don't want it to happen again. It shouldn't have happened, but it's not the apocalypse. It's not the end of democracy.
And the pipe bombs seal it for me. The fact that 2 fake pipe bombs were planted by the FBI, presumably at the DNC and RNC, it tells me that somebody had something like this in mind from the get-go.
Well, take a look at AOC's story. So this is amazing because when this story broke, no one caught this. And I remember I was tweeting, I was DMing with a journalist on X. AOC puts out this hour-long Instagram stream where she's like, I'm in my office, and then I hear boom, 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 and I go hide in the bathroom. Then I hear a voice, where is she? Where is she? And that's how she said it. And then she's like, I thought I was going to die or whatever. But it turned out to have been an officer who was evacuating her. The funny thing about this is she's framing the story as the rioters have made it to my office. They finally got here.
Gandalf, the book that he finds in
right. The first thing that happens is everyone immediately says, what? AOC's not in the Capitol building. And the fact checkers come out and go, actually, there are tunnels that connect those buildings. So she did reasonably fear that the rioters in the Capitol had made it to her office. And then I tweeted, I was reviewing the timeline to figure out when this story was. Her story took place 1 hour before the Capitol was breached. So did she know that there was going to be a breaching of the Capitol in advance that no one else knew? And how did she know? No, the reality is she's making up a fake story. I get some journalists, I think it was from Huffington Post, being like, no, that's not correct. And then I showed the story, showed what she said, showed the timeline of when she ordered. The officer who knocked on her door was evacuating because of the pipe bombs. No one knew that the Capitol was going to be breached 1 hour later. Mm-hmm. So she made up a fake story where she was like, after everybody had already witnessed the Capitol being breached, she pretended like she was terrified it was happening, and people ate it up, and they bought that lie. Yep. Unless, okay, no, guys, I'm sorry. I should not accuse AOC of being a liar. She knew that rioters were going to breach the Capitol the whole time because there was a conspiracy and they had planned for it. Is that the response? Yeah. No, she's a liar.
My favorite line from that live stream of hers was where she said, I knew I was in mortal danger in a general sense, but also in a very specific sense.
Has Thomas Massey told you his story about that day? Because he was in his office.
I'm pretty sure he did.
Did we
but
just
I don't
find Kamala's speechwriter?
It's hilarious. A couple of the key points of Massey's story is that when they got the announcement, because it went out to all of them that they were locking the buildings down. The House and Senate office buildings were going to be locked down, and because specifically the bombs were found in near proximity to those House buildings, office buildings, and so he told his senior staff. He said, "If you don't get out of here, you're going to be locked in here for 12 hours. So we're not getting out." So he told his senior staff to leave, and they wouldn't leave. And he's like, "Guys, I'm telling you, you need to go now. Go home." And his staffers are going, "Boss, is this a loyalty test?" And he goes, "No, it's an IQ test. Get the hell out of here now." and then he said, "Of course, everybody knows that I'm the only guy here." He said, "All of my Democrat, office neighbors," he said, "they know that I've got guns in here." So he said, so they started sending their staff over, and they got locked into my staff. And of course, him being an engineer, what he did is, because they didn't know if the building was going to be breached, they had no idea. But so what he did is he took a milk crate and he taped 2 iPhones on each side with the cameras going out and put it outside the door so he could monitor the hallways and see who was coming down. I mean, he's incredible.
I just got a really great idea for a movie. J6 Zombie Apocalypse, and it's January 6, 2028, and zombies have overrun the Capitol. And the Democrats are panicking, and they all huddle inside Thomas Massey's office, and he puts a bandana on, and he spins a Winchester, and he's like, "Let's go!" And the zombies are in the halls of the Capitol building.
It's a great idea.
Massey's the only one with guns.
In our movie, we reenacted the insurrection with Lego guys, and we also paid an animator on Fiverr to recreate the insurrection for us. So it's very, very serious journalism. Yeah,
awesome.
Well, what do you guys think? We're going to have January 6, 2.0, 2025?
No, look, that if we're going to characterize it as that was our bad day, you know what I mean?
We will if Trump wins. If Trump wins, we will have they will burn down D.C. if Trump wins.
But that'll happen.
November. The left, Antifa.
Yeah, that'll be November 6th that'll happen.
Yeah. We're not going to know who won on the 6th.
Well,
they got to bring all the mail-in votes in to make sure that they have just enough to beat Trump in Pennsylvania.
Oh my gosh!
And the mountains of North Carolina.
Yeah,
but the left will definitely riot if Trump wins. I'll be up here for his inauguration.
They rioted the first time he won. So I was there on the ground January 20th, 2017. And there's roving bands of hundreds, 300 to 400 black-clad individuals setting fires, smashing windows, running through the streets, knocking things over. Police are pepper spraying people. And this is the kind of stuff that I covered frequently. Luke Rudkowski was there as well. And there was this one point where I can't remember what street we were on. The police started to line up. And so there's 2 choices you can make. You can charge the police line. Well, that's risky because now you are putting yourself in with the rioters by charging a police line to break through. But my assumption usually is when they form a line, get out of the way of the police, don't stand in front of the line. They're going to start pushing through. Yep. So I went into a stairwell. Fortunately for me, all the rioters followed me into the stairwell and surrounded me as I pressed up against the door. And then the cops formed their line around that stairwell, roping in, kettling in about 200 to 300 people.
Jeez.
The first thing I did was, so the police make the announcement, you have all been arrested, you are under arrest. And so I moved my way to the far right side of this area of the rioters. And calmly, I looked at the officer to my right, and he's standing with his baton out. I was like, "Officer, I'm going to take my backpack off and just put it down. I'm a journalist. I've got my press credentials." He says nothing. I said, "Just want to let you know what I'm doing." And I slowly put the bag down. And then I asked if any of you guys could call over a supervisor or fan them over. I am a journalist. And one of the cops looks at me and he nods a little bit. And then he yells something. And then he looks over at a guy and he goes like this. Officer Washington, I think his name was, walks over and is like, "What's going on?" And he points at me. And I was like, "Excuse me, sir, I'm a journalist. I'm a reporter. I have my press credentials." He goes, "No, you're all under arrest. That's it." And I said, "I'm just letting you know. That's what I have to do." And he's like, "Whatever." He walks away. A young Asian reporter for a local news outlet is also there with her camera guy, begins saying the same thing, like, "We're reporters. Why are we here?" They call the same supervisor over. And he says, nope, you have all been arrested. You are not going anywhere. And I looked at him and I was like, "Just letting you know is what we have to do." Finally, then, this young reporter, she's on the phone. Her newsroom, I'm assuming what happened is calls the police and says, why have you arrested our well-dressed, makeup-clad street reporter with a cameraman? And so he walks over and he goes, who's the journalist? And then they wave, and then I wave, and a couple other people who are now realizing what we're doing smile and wave. And he says, he looks at us, you guys have your press credentials on you? And everyone says yes. And he goes, okay. He pulls out the TV reporters first. They show their cards and he goes, go that way, get out of here. Then he pulls another person out and I look at him and I wave and he goes like this and he goes, show me your credentials. And I have like 7. Like I've worked for a bunch of companies. And then he's like, okay, you can go that way. Here's a funny thing. So I tweet, I tell the story. I said, they arrested me. They told me 3 times I had been arrested. But fortunately, this local TV station called it in. And because they had to get pulled out, he said, okay, I'm going to get the rest of the journalists out too. There were some journalists, will do air quotes, they're going to get so mad when they see this show, by the way, who did not get pulled out. And they said, it's BS. You know, some of them were like, they must be feds. How did they get released and we got arrested? I'll tell you, because the journalists were in the front of the crowd of rioters, screaming in the face, spit flying, F you, you mother effer, you can't arrest me, I'm a journalist. And the rest of us went over and we're like, we're terribly sorry about this. We are professionals and we have been caught up in your arrest here. And so they go on a claim that it's a conspiracy or some other nonsense. But here's what ends up happening. Around 200 and some odd arrests of that crowd, they'll get processed. They're all wearing masks. The federal government cannot prove who individually committed a crime. So the first thing that happens is a couple of these guys start taking plea deals. And the lawyers for the activists start telling all of the activists, stop taking deals. They cannot criminally prosecute you, fight it. And so what happens is, in a couple of the cases, the defense successfully argues, did you see my client start a fire, smash a window, commit a crime, or in other ways break the law? And they said, yes. How did you identify them? He's wearing a mask. Well, there was a black-clad individual wearing these clothes, and they're like, is it reasonable to assume that with all of these people wearing the same clothes, you could not determine who actually was? Reasonable doubt. So the government changes their strategy and says conspiracy to commit the crime. And the judge is like, you cannot charge a group of people with conspiracy for wearing the same clothes. So they all end up getting the charges dropped, file a lawsuit against the federal government, and won over $1 million in cash. Mm-hmm. So the insurrectionists in 2017, they torched. There was a limousine driver, a private contractor. He was an immigrant. They torched his limousine because they're like, screw the rich people. It's a guy who bought a vehicle. He rents it out to drive people around. They set fires in the street. They smashed windows. They were ransacking public property, flipping over garbage cans, and they got paid cash. That's the difference between the left and the right.
It's insane.
But I will tell you this, a large component is the right doesn't organize. They did not have masks. They had no plans. The difference is, I hate to say it, but anybody who studied this stuff knows that as much as the TV would like to tell you otherwise, the terrifying reality of crime in this country is that premeditated murder is almost never solved. You know what police are looking for. And so they're saying there's a serial killer maybe up in Long Island. It's been going on for decades because they're planning this on how to avoid detection. Most murders we get are passion. Someone in the heat of the moment does something bad, and then there's a spattering of evidence. For Antifa and the far left, they plan their crimes in advance, well organized, making it very difficult. They exploit the system so they can't be charged. And on January 6th, a bunch of doofy dotards and right-wing dudes with no real plans walked around, ended up in the Capitol, some doing bad things, many just walking around, but their faces are all clearly visible. Many of them aren't wearing masks. They're trying to help the police. Complete disorganization ends up with all of them mostly getting, or not, I shouldn't say about many of them, going to jail for long periods of time, whereas the left got paid cash.
Yeah. And I use that January 20th of 2017 as a comparative all the time. I've debated other mainstream media journalists about this, and we go back to the NPC. My brain is that they cannot see the difference between what's going on. And the difference is, very clearly, you're talking about a leftist system in a leftist city And when we say leftist, we're not talking about marginally. This is 95% Democrat voters there. And that's who the jury pools are made up of. That's who the courts are made up of. Everybody that works there, that's who it's made up of.
There's a reason they kept all the cases in D.C.
That's exactly why. And so when you start seeing those cases from 2017 being dismissed, you started seeing hung juries, you started seeing acquittals, and then the DOJ just went, crap. They threw up their hands and dismissed the rest of the cases. They dismissed them, over 200 cases, after they realized they weren't going to win. And then, as Tim properly pointed out, then they started awarding them money.
Yep.
That's the kind of injustice that will drive good people insane.
Well,
everyone sees it.
It will drive people insane because, look, on January 6th, I was there with another journalist. And we were standing out in the lawn at the Washington Monument, that morning early. We got there about 9:30 in the morning. Trump didn't take the stage till 11:57. He was an hour late getting on his stage. We were freezing. It was cold. There's tens of thousands of people around us. I mean, it was an incredible sight, and it was joyous. It was it was celebratory, despite the wind and the cold. And I am taking like 360, camera shots of, video shots of this crowd. I've never been in a crowd this large before in my life, and I'm awestruck by it. And I said to the other journalist who was with me, I said, okay, this is a Wednesday morning. Why are all these conservatives here? Conservatives work. If this had been a Saturday, I might have expected 250,000, 400,000 people to be there. But this is a Wednesday. And I said, is this because they're still not back at work because of COVID? Or are they just this frustrated at the system, or what's going on right now?
Here, go.
No, so these were, rhetorical questions that I was asking. I wasn't expecting an actual answer. But in hindsight, what happened is that very, very small handful of provocateurs knew that this was dry tinder out there.
Yeah.
And that it just took a little bit to light that fire.
So this is a story from ABC News. Washington to pay $1.6 million to settle lawsuits after protests at Trump's 2017 inauguration. The class action suit alleged mass arrests and excessive force. They reached a $1.6 million settlement in two suits. The lawsuits were brought by the American Civil Liberties Union of D.C. and attorney Jeffrey Light on behalf of protesters. The ACLU said in a statement Monday that the lawsuit alleged police chief Newsham and more than 20 officers engaged in or supervised constitutional violations, including mass arrests of demonstrators without probable cause, unlawful conditions, and confinement for detainees, and or use of excessive force. And I wonder if y'all can notice anything in this image.
Let's see.
Nobody? I'll just give you a couple seconds.
General lack of testosterone?
Nope, there's me.
Oh, there it is.
You can actually see this is me holding up my press pass and my phone as I'm live streaming what's going on. And if you squint, you can tell that's me from one of the photos that I actually use on YouTube.
That's White Dudes for Harris right there.
Yeah.
When they say excessive force, do they mean like blind firing into a crowd and shooting a woman in the neck, or beating someone to death on the Capitol stairs? What is excessive force in this case?
They mean that they surrounded them and made them stand there for 3 hours.
Oh, that's excessive force.
I mean, geez, some people were hungry.
I'll note that the ACLU has never reached out to me to, defend me as for my First Amendment.
Well, you may notice
violated.
Yeah.
You may notice in this photo as well these green hats that you'll see all over the place. At the time when I was covering protests, what I was told of these individuals with green hats, they're the National Lawyers Guild, is that they're there to observe police behavior and protester behavior to provide constitutional defenses for protesters. And I said, oh, well, that's cool, I guess. So you're volunteers and you're lawyers, and yeah. And then we watch, and if the police act a fool, and I'm like, I like that, to check on government, you know what I mean? And then one day I was in Boston, and there was a bunch of right-wing individuals, and on the other side of the park was a bunch of left-wing individuals. The people on the right were holding shields. The people on the left, quite literally the left, were holding crowbars and baseball bats, and the National Lawyers Guild was standing alongside them. And I know most of these people, and so I walked over and I was talking to them, and I was like, yeah, what's going on? And they were like, we're just doing our thing, blah, blah, blah. And I had friends who were over there, and they're like, hey, look, it's Tim, because Tim covers all the protests. And then I said to the National Lawyers Guild, I was like, how come there's no National Lawyers Guild people over there? And they were like, what do you mean? And I said, how come you guys aren't observing the other side? I mean, what if police do something? And they were like, what do you mean? I was
Doesn't
like,
even register with them.
no, they're
They're the bad guys.
Well, and someone told me like they're a progressive leftist activist group that masquerade as legal protection. Their purpose actually is just to provide means of, I mean, look what they did. These people ran around. No, with all due respect, I can tell you a handful of those people in there, some of them I know, did nothing wrong and should never have been arrested. These people right here who are by me were not smashing anything. There were a bunch of people black clad in hoodies and masks that were smashing things up. You can see I'm filming. There's another guy who's filming. There's 2 or 3 people who are there just filming. And they did wrongly round up a lot of people. That is BS. Okay, but, you know, to stand there and just provide defense for the people who are knowingly organizing to destroy and damage this, and then ignore, you know, what goes on the other side. You are just an activist. You are not legal protection. It is just another mechanism by which they can get away with committing crimes.
They're so organized. Like, they're so good at being evil. It's insane. And it's going back to kind of like, you know, the bumbling right versus this organized, calculated evil left. It's just, it can be overwhelming to see all that. See, here's the issue I see with this. Because I can look at this photo and say, I remember that day. And yeah, there's probably a lot of people in that crowd, I would, including the other journalists, who should not have been stopped, who committed no crimes, did nothing wrong, and were wrongfully arrested. The problem is, you can easily separate that. You can say, look, here's a guy wearing a green shirt. He's not a part of the group of people with black masks throwing rocks and bricks and setting fires. Get him out of here. And if they had actually centered on only the people, if the cops were like, if you are part of the group of black mask wearing hoodies, black jeans that we have witnessed committing crimes, you're going to end up arresting 50 to 100 people, not 200 random people. And the fact that they brought journalists into this is probably what helped the far leftists, the writers, get payouts. Yeah. Because then the lawyers will say, look at these journalists. This guy's got a credential with this, you know, magazine. Police screwed up. But, you know, here's the challenge. You're a cop in D.C. There's a gigantic mass of people running through the streets. Many of them are smashing things and starting fires. You can't stop it. What do? Well, they said, screw it. We'll deal with the repercussions later. Arrest everybody. And then you end up letting all the criminals go because you did that. Instead of pulling them out one by one and making the difficult choice of arresting one at a time, which is often what police do. They'll go into the crowd, identify someone, wait, then they reach out, grab them, and pull them to the other side. With this mass arrest, they basically let them get away with it. Now, that being said, on January 6th, there were many people who bumbled in, were regular people who committed no crimes. They got the book thrown at them. Right. These people were the justification for letting the criminals go. That's insane. One of the guys in our movie, Siaka, he's actually was on Babylon Bee staff. He's done videos for us and stuff like that. He was in one of the doorways for maybe 60 seconds. Didn't even really go all the way in, was kind of in the doorway. The police at one point said, hey, you know, can we clear out the, you know, this area so people can exit the building? And he, all on video, he turns around and says to the crowd outside, hey guys, you know, clear away so people can get out. And he assisted the police officers, was very friendly, very courteous. And he's the guy that was arrested in front of his pregnant wife on the tarmac, coming back from a Daily Wire movie premiere. The FBI raided his house, confiscated all his cell phones and his laptops. It still hasn't returned. They confiscated his Trump hat, his MAGA hat.
You know, I got to be honest. Like, it really does seem that the only way any of this makes sense is that they wanted members of Congress to get hurt.
This is exactly what they wanted. And look, Siaka is a great example, and there's so many others. The one story that I enjoy, or I hate to even have to tell his story, is, you know, J.D. Rivera, is he was a journalist. He was contracted by an actual mainstream news station in Mobile, Alabama, to go up. He had his full big professional gear on his shoulder. He went through the same window that Luke Mogelson for the New Yorker went through. They almost paralleled each other through the Capitol. And he was the first guy arrested in Florida. They swatted him and his family, 6:30 in the morning, red dots on his wife and on his children on the porch, 25 agents, minimum of 25 agents. He was not going to plead guilty. He was not going to take a plea deal to something. He was there performing the work of a journalist. You're not arresting Luke Mogelson. You're not arresting the other guys. He was wearing no MAGA stuff. He did commit a crime, though. You know what it was? Before January 6th, he had been an activist with Latinos for Trump.
Wow.
So that was his crime. He goes to trial, does a bench trial. Judge finds him guilty on all 4 of his misdemeanors. Now he's swatted, right, for nonviolent misdemeanors as a journalist. 8 months in prison was his sentence.
The only way any of this makes sense,
He was the first one arrested.
is that
In Florida.
that the Democrat leadership and these people were hoping, or at least they expected, that members of Congress would be seriously injured or something would happen, because then if you look at how this all goes down, a SWAT raid for a misdemeanor, that makes no sense. What about a photo of a senator being beaten or something like that happening? Then the SWAT raids are like they're going after the people who assaulted the Capitol and attacked members of.
It's like they had the plan and the narrative already in place, and they said, okay, well, none of this happened, but we're going to go with it anyway.
Yeah, well, I was Nancy Pelosi's daughter there filming a documentary during that day.
What?
Nancy Pelosi's daughter was there filming a documentary that day.
I had no clue.
She actually reached out to me. She wanted me to be in her documentary.
For you to know that?
No, I did not know
And
that.
on the documentary, Nancy Pelosi says, I take full responsibility for this failure.
I've seen that. That's from the documentary?
Yeah.
Wow.
She says it's my fault, and Trump brought it up, and they're like, shut up, Trump, you can't.
She tried to get me in her documentary 3 times. Would not leave my attorneys alone. I told her I would go on, but I want to be with your mom.
See, and that's the other thing that's crazy.
But you're not allowed
me
to ask
is
for money or anything.
That I'm immersed in the news. I live this stuff day in and day out. I'm hearing stuff just in this podcast that is news to me as a right-wing guy who's always in the news. I mean, normies aren't hearing any of this.
Right.
None of this is getting out.
As part of the terms of your, I guess, were you convicted or you took a plea, or how did?
I took a plea deal. We got the felony dropped and the violent entry dropped because I walked through open doors. Not sure that's violent entry. And I settled with a glorified trespassing. It's the misdemeanor.
So part of this is that you can't profit in any way off of.
I have 2 years left, so anytime I go to these podcasts or hang out with you guys, it's all on my dollar by dime. But having fun doing it.
So in the instant of being asked to be in the documentary, would you be allowed to say to her, in 2 years, I will do it if you pay me X amount of dollars? Or you can't even ask her the money now for advance, right?
No. Her documentary did finish. That was released, I think, about a year ago.
Yeah.
About a year ago, but it's exactly what I thought it was going to be. She didn't paint anyone in a good light.
She was filming a documentary in the Capitol. What was the original intent of the documentary?
That's a great question.
All right, I have to take off the tinfoil hat and explain that January 6th is a constitutional day. Every 4 years, it is a significant day on our constitutional calendar. So the fact that there was going to be the certification of electoral college vote that day, I mean, there were over 100 journalists invited to be there that day that were already inside the building.
And Trump had been contesting the election. There had been many lawsuits,
correct.
And they knew that there were states sending alternate electors.
That's correct. So there were other items of interest going on, but back to your point, Tim, is that there was a plan that did not happen that day. There was a plan for things to happen that did not transpire in the manner in which they believed. And I say this all the time, and I go on the record on a regular basis. One of my dead man switches is that I tell certain things that we're working on podcasts, and I tell them on TV shows, I tell them in interviews, is because I think that when we finally settle this thing conclusively, you're going to find out that this plan was hatched in the DOD. It did not come out of the mind of Pelosi.
You said you were taking off your tinfoil hat.
What's that?
You said you were taking off your tinfoil.
Oh no, I'm putting. No, this is not tinfoil.
You're like layers deep now.
I'm telling you what happened that day. I'm telling you that this was hatched in Mark Milley's office, and that this was why the National Guard was turned down, because those 3 generals who turned down the National Guard and said they didn't, for the reasons of optics, they were answering for Milley, who was not on that call at the time. And the Secretary of the Army was also mysteriously gone that day. And then in addition to that, you're going to learn that because our special forces are so skilled in color revolution techniques, and I'll give you an exact quote from a 3-star general, former second in command of SOCOM, to me. He said, all I would need is 4 or 5 of my best guys to make January 6th happen.
Well, power in the world, people don't quite understand. What does it mean to win a war, to win a conflict? And so I often entertain the silliness of war crimes as a concept. We talk about them on the show, but I will point out, what's a war crime? When two entities are fighting an existential war, do you think either really cares about what's criminal or not?
No.
It is that we are gentlemanly men of the liberal economic order who say, no, we have war crimes and you best not commit them. However, if the United States or its allies does things that should be considered war crimes, they tend to go unanswered. The concept of war crimes typically exists for those in power to restrict actions against them or give justification in casus belli for retaliation should you engage in this conflict. That being said, what does it mean to truly win power? I'll say this, and it's not an advocacy of, but if on May 29th, 2020, when the far left firebombed St. John's Church and they ripped down the barricades and were attacking police, if Donald Trump sat down in his chair and crossed his legs and looked at Barr and said, stand down. And sir, excuse me? I said, withdraw our law enforcement and stand down. What would have happened? The far left would have jumped the fence of the White House, torn things down. St. John's Church would be torched. They'd breach the White House, shatter things. Trump would be in the emergency bunker with a small contingent protecting him. The next day, they would say, my God, what has happened to this country? Trump would come out and say, yesterday, good and honest, peaceful protesters were expressing themselves in our great city. But there was a contingent of violent insurrectionists who took that moment and our goodwill in an attempt to overthrow the seat of power in our nation. We asked our law enforcement to stand down, not to allow that to happen. We did it because we were concerned about the safety of the honest and peaceful journalists, our peaceful protesters and journalists who were there, and they exploited this. It is a tradition in this country, especially in D.C., to have your word and to speak your mind. But upon us deciding to avoid a conflict with innocent people that could risk injury, we were assaulted and attacked by a contingent of far-left terrorists that operate under the banner of Antifa. Could you imagine what the narrative would be if Trump said stand down? The insurrection would be May 29th. The issue is Republicans are doofy and they do things by the book. And they said, we're being attacked. And they went, tell the police to get rid of them. And the next day it was Trump attacks peaceful protesters for photo op. On January 6th, when you watch a guy, one of the people at the Capitol, run to the police and say, stop this. What are you guys doing? Why are you just standing there? And they do nothing. You have to wonder. When Trump says, he said, I want to bring in the National Guard. And they said, no, you have to wonder. What was the real point of all of everything that went down? Well, look, without me accusing anyone of anything, let's just make it a simple, logical game. If outside of any kind of false flag operation or conspiracy or whatever, if on May 29th, the protesters repelled the police, burned down St. John's Church, and successfully breached the White House grounds, which they had firebombed, by the way, there would be no January 6th. Donald Trump would be president right now, closing out his second term, and who knows what we'd be seeing. But Trump and the Republicans in Barr said, we're going to get rid of these protesters, and they did.
We're too decent.
Yeah. It's straightforward.
We have straightforward, decent, rule-playing people against Hamas.
Well, I gotta tell you, it is the ninja versus the samurai, my friend. The samurai, with their great honor and Bushido, are standing at the gate saying, this is how fighting is supposed to be. Yep. We have training, we have honor. And the ninjas are like, let's sneak in the back. And they do.
That great moment from the opening of that video game, Ghost of Tsushima, where the samurai goes down to meet the barbarian, in an honorable way. This is how the battle's going to, and the barbarian just pours gas on him and lights him on fire. Like it's honor versus dishonor.
No, the person who wins war is capable of greater violence. That's how that works.
And it's not completely true. A lot of people like to romanticize the Revolutionary War as the American use of guerrilla tactics, but that's largely not true. The American revolutionaries did utilize guerrilla tactics more so, and it was the British were unsuspecting so, but it's romanticized. The reality is largely that battles were fought marching in front of each other on a battlefield and then everyone shooting at each other. And you think about it right now. In what reality would a smart, logical person be like, everyone line up and then walk towards the other person while you openly fire and don't take cover? It seems stupid, but it was this honor battle. And I love the movie The Patriot. Probably my favorite movie ever, where Mel Gibson is negotiating with Cornwallis, and he says, onto negotiations, first order of affairs, you will stop shooting my officers. And he says, so long as your officers are ordering the killing of women and children, I will order my men to shoot them on sight. And then Cornwallis says, could you imagine what the battlefield would be like without gentlemen? Chaos, people running around, and is that what they thought? It's crazy these days. Now you got dudes burying themselves half in the ground with AK-47s popping up and opening fire because winning is what they're trying to accomplish, and this gentlemanly idea of conflict is meaningless. So what do you end up seeing? Those that are engaged in subterfuge and subversion are going to win the narrative battle. And those who keep trying to play the straightforward game of these are the rules, my friends, I got to tell you, Trump keeps trying to win the argument. He goes up on stage and he does these big rallies and he says, I'm going to fix this, I'm going to fix that, here's how I'm going to do it. And Kamala Harris dodges the interviews and she gives non-answers. And everyone's like, haha, she really can't win, she has no argument. And then Democrats are like, just go ballot harvest. You don't need to convince anybody. Just get a piece of paper with their name on it, you win. So Republicans need to start thinking about the mechanisms of power and not the straightforward surface level game. Because basically what they're saying is, let's play a game of Monopoly where for some reason, our Democrat buddy always says, I'll be the banker. And we're like, yeah, that's cool. We're okay with you being the banker. But somehow they always have extra money. No matter what we do, they just keep, and they're pulling 500s out of the bank and saying, no, I get this. It's mine.
Yeah, because the left's loyalty isn't to the system. The left's loyalty is to their higher evil ideals that the system is, that they're trying to serve. And the system is nothing but a lever to accomplish those higher ideals. Most conservatives are still, their loyalty is to the system. We must protect the system. And I think we need to start thinking about what those higher ideals are. And that idea of by any means necessary has been the left's MO for decades. Yeah. And unfortunately, in this one-sided war we're in, conservatives are going to have to start thinking like that. How do we use some of these mechanisms to accomplish our higher ideals? Once the system's broken, what's left?
But I think the important thing to and close that off with is the ends don't justify the means because you'll never meet the ends. And the one thing I can say that is good of the right for not engaging in these nefarious and malicious tactics is if you are to adopt these behaviors of your enemies to create a system, they've won. Our whole purpose is to stop the evil and create a sound, honorable, logical, and loyal system. And at any point, someone on the right says, you know what, let's just do what the left does. It's like, congratulations. They're sitting there laughing, saying, we got you to build the system we've been trying to build forever. So we have to be honorable. We have to do it by the book, but we have to be smart about it.
I distill it down to conservatives have convictions and liberals have marching orders. And that really is what separates us. And we can't abandon our convictions because it's what makes us who we are. And I think within the Republican Party, there's a very large divide right now between where the new Republican Party is marching and where the old Republican Party is being left behind. And I see it on Twitter all the time. Maybe Twitter's not real. I haven't figured that or not. But it's a lot of people are upset with Melania coming out being pro-abortion. And there's a lot of conservative influencers that are saying, hey, she's allowed to be that. It's fine. It's fine. Just march forward. We need votes. But we're leaving convictions behind. And that truly does concern me.
Yeah.
How do we beat, though, the mindset of a party that looks at the tragedy in Western North Carolina right now as opportunity instead of just what it is, a tragedy that we need to provide assistance, relief, and recovery for? Yep. Because they see it now as, holy crap, you realize that with 25 counties down, this may actually give us the election.
So yeah, it's pure evil you're staring down.
Yep.
It's really, and that's where you have to, I mean, it can be so overwhelming when you think about what we're up against, the money and the power and the things that are being done. And we were kind of talking about this on the way up in the car that you have, as a Christian, I kind of have to keep the long-term hope in mind, that we serve a God who has his will always be accomplished. We know who wins in the end. We know that good wins in the end, regardless of what happens in the short term. Truth ultimately triumphs over lies. Sometimes it just takes a long time, even if not in our lifetime. Suppressing the truth is like trying to keep a beach ball under the surface of the water. Mm-hmm. It's very hard. The Democrats have to use a lot of money and power to keep it that way, but eventually sometimes it pops up and in funny ways, and that's kind of what we saw on Twitter. Where we were fighting a losing battle with big tech. The Babylon Bee is being threatened by Facebook. We get kicked off of Twitter, and suddenly, Gandalf Elon rides in on his white horse with the riders of Rohan, right? And suddenly we have this powerful free speech platform that really is. I mean, it has changed history in ways that we don't even fully comprehend. And so you kind of got to hold on to that hope that we're going to fight the fight on the daily. Regardless of what happens in the short term, we know that we're fighting for the right cause, and we trust that we're serving a God who will reward that and that will win in the end.
Elon's great. I think people rely too much on someone else to do the work for them.
Yeah.
Largely on the right, thinking, if I vote for Trump, he'll solve the problem. We have cultural problems that need to be solved. People need to raise their kids better. And I don't mean that as a dig, like you're better at raising your kids. I'm saying like be the best you can for your children is a better way to put it. But too often people are like, hey, look, Elon's saving free speech. No. He is a juggernaut who broke down a major barrier, but it's going to require diligence and vigilance on our part forever. The price
We're in a generational war. This is not something that changes overnight.
Yeah, a lot of people feel helpless right now. But what I always tell people is that you raising good kids is 10 times more powerful than your vote or your activism or your blips on social media. Raising good kids to love and care for and stand for the truth, who have integrity, that's the long-term battle that we're fighting.
I got 5 sons, and we work on that on a daily basis. I will say, though, in the culture, we are seeing a couple things that are kind of turning out. Woke is dying.
Yeah,
it is on its way out. I knew the moment it was dying. It's when who's the guy with the curly hair? Syndicate radio host. Can't think of his name. It's been around forever.
Howard Stern?
Howard Stern. This is the guy, yeah. So
I forget his name sometimes, too.
Yeah, Howard Stern came out. It's like, yeah, I'm woke. I'm woke as hell. And I'm like, God, when Grandpa says he's into the new thing, like, that's when you know it's on its way out.
Well, for me, it was the other day when I saw that YouTube had Timcast IRL featured on their live. So for anybody who went to YouTube Live, you would see Timcast IRL playing, and I was like, wow. And, we had Dallas Sanye on yesterday, and I said, I don't know what happened, but somebody at Google might have been like, hey, this IRL show is really popular. Why aren't we featuring it? And then they were like, oh, but isn't he a fascist? And then someone went, no. And they were like, oh, okay, I guess we'll feature it. All of a sudden, Timcast IRL is featured number 1. I was like, something happened at Google, man. Mm-hmm. Wow, that's not just decensoring. That's not just lifting the weight off our back because they had their thumb on the scale. That's actually putting us on top of the pedestal. That's crazy to me. Something happened.
Nature is healing.
We fired up the theater last week, and we watched Inside Out 2 with the kids, fully prepared to make fun of the movie the entire time, throw popcorn at the screen, because that's what we do. My kids are older, so we make fun of the woke
loaded
stuff.
with gay stuff, I'm sure, right?
They actually actively removed all of it.
That's what I heard, yeah.
Yeah, so the movie was actually a good movie, and I was surprised.
It was the highest grossing animated movie in history.
What?
And I'm told that there was an internal battle at Disney because they actually had originally in the original script, Riley, the main character, they had
there are undertones of that.
Undertones of kind of a lesbian love affair with this other girl at school. They took all that out. There was a big internal battle at Disney, and sure enough,
I don't want to point out because I just checked, but I got an image here that may should tweet. But we are featured number 2 right now on YouTube Live. There's a big old lectern guy just right on the front page.
Oh, look at that!
So YouTube has on their default live page right now the calm musings of lectern guy. It says a lot. I think it does.
Hopefully, having insurrectionists on your show doesn't remove you from the featured.
But we've had you on. Well, it's like the third or
my 4th time up here.
Yeah,
you were actually one of. So I was on. I think I was on with Luke a few months ago, and I was talking about, I actually brought you up. I said, there were a handful of people who gave me a chance to speak and get my story straight, and I actually brought up you guys as well. I said, no, it was Tim Pool, it was Clint, it was Josie, it was Babylon B reaching out and trying to set the story straight, and that meant the world to me. So people, I'm sure you're on Twitter, people talk crap about you, and it's, water.
People talk crap about me before Twitter, it's like, it's part of growing up.
I have no problem saying this man gave me a voice and a chance to speak and clear my name. Sorry, I'm kind of on his side with this one.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I complain on the internet and invite people to come complain with me. And
The most egregious thing that happened to you, Adam, was that you lost your PlayStation account. That was
What?
all
Yeah,
weird.
this actually happened. So I'm a PlayStation guy. Actually, I play video games like at 2 o'clock in the morning when the kids are asleep.
That's the only time you can play them when you're a dad of 5
That's it.
kids. Yeah.
That's it. So I've had an account forever, right? So I get back a couple months after prison, and my PlayStation account gets taken from me, and I had something like 100 platinum trophies. Like, like a lot of time, a lot of wasted time went into that. So I've been slowly grinding through and getting my platinums back.
well, they banned you for being the lectern guy. Is that?
They gave me no reason. They gave me no reason whatsoever. But my 10-year account just gone.
I think we're winning. You know, I think the dam broke. I think Disney lost $1 billion and then shed a brick.
Yep.
You know, again, Dallas was here, and he's this big movie producer. He's working with the Daily Wire and things like that. And he was. I heard this rumor that Kevin Feige at Marvel fired a bunch of activists. And it's fascinating because you can tell when it started at Marvel. You know, look, I often talk about how conservatives, they complain a lot. People on the right and post-liberals, the anti-woke, complain a lot about when movies go woke, but they don't praise the movies that get it right. Mm-hmm. So I take a look and they say, oh, superhero movies are dumb. What do you like? Captain America, the First Avenger, is a movie that I think every dad should show to his son. You know why?
Yes.
He's a scrawny guy, Steve Rogers. He's got all these different ailments, but he is desperate to serve his country. He feels he owes this country a debt of gratitude for what they've offered him. He wants to help fight, and he keeps trying to enlist. He's actually lying about his name to keep trying, but he keeps failing. And so you have this story of a guy trying to serve his country, to fight the bad guys and fight evil. And Steve Rogers is a great character. In this movie, you got this great scene where, what is it? What's the guy's name? Tom
Holland?
No, the old guy. The old actor. I forget his name. He's the general. He's basically like training a bunch of guys. And then you have Stanley Tucci, who's the scientist. And
the guy who plays Elrond and Agent Smith.
No, it's not him. He's
not the Nazi guy.
he's the skull guy. Tommy Jones or whatever. Tommy Lee Jones.
Oh, okay.
His name? I don't know.
Was he?
But he's like, we don't want a scrawny guy like this. We want someone tough who's got guts. And then
That's right, yeah.
he pulls the fake grenade and throws it. And then all the dudes jump away, but Steve Rogers, scrawny weak, jumps on and it's like, get back.
Yeah.
And then the scientist starts laughing like, he didn't even. It's a training exercise, and he's jumping on the grenade.
That's what those early Marvel movies are, great studies in heroism. Steve Rogers was a hero before he ever got the serum. Iron Man is the opposite of that, where he had the money and the power and the suit, but he didn't have the integrity of character that he had to. You know, so you kind of see those two things that you need. You need the power, the physical strength, but you also need this inward character.
That's actually really fascinating. Yeah, Iron Man has all the power without a care in the world.
Right.
Experiences suffering and realizes what his power has wrought and turns it around. Steve Rogers had the character but no power.
Yep.
Well, you know, I watched. So after we talked about this, this rumor has been circulating that Kevin Feige was like, "Why are our movies starting to fail? I was the king of the castle. Every movie was $1 billion movie. I mean, it's unprecedented how big these movies were." And he nukes all of the woke activists who were writing the stuff. And I think you can see the moment it started. It was Captain Marvel. So you take a look at Infinity War. I think Infinity War is a masterpiece. It was 3 movies in one, 3 different color schemes. Seriously, I watched this it's like a movie film director breaking down how he was so impressed by how they did this. Thanos, the villain, is actually the main character. He's the protagonist. And then, because all the other characters are around him, and he wins in the end. It starts with him, it ends with him. And then in between this, you get Captain Marvel. Brie Larson, this dainty, woke female, and I mean it in the real world. She's very woke. She's an activist. She's tweeting all this garbled nonsense. They say, we're going to have her take over and be what Robert Downey Jr. was. Yeah. Her character, her profile does not fit the character she's meant to play. Captain Marvel, whether people really didn't like the character to begin with, but she's like this thin, frail woman. They want to play this Superman-like character.
And her character was so unlikable.
Absolutely unlikable.
Sneer on her face the whole time.
But I don't blame Brie Larson for this. She was the wrong choice for this role. And they were like, we're going to girl boss this. Then you watch Endgame. And what do you get? You get the girl power moment that everyone groaned about.
Yep.
And all the woke people cheered. But when I was in the theater when Endgame came out, the whole audience groaned in the theater when they did that scene at the end where all the women were like, she's not alone, and all the women walked together. I heard, oh. And then you have the scene where Brie Larson's fighting Thanos, who's supposed to be the greatest villain of all time. He headbutts her, and she doesn't move, and she just looks at him. And it's like, oh, my God, just stop. And I put the movie on last night, and I was watching, and I was like, that's when they went heavy into girl boss, woke, feminist, all of that stuff.
And they got the wrong signal from that movie because that movie made like $1 billion.
Endgame.
Captain Marvel did.
Right.
But it was really coasting off of the success of Endgame and Infinity War. And so they got this idea that this is what the audience wants now.
And then what did it lead to?
Yeah.
The back end of the bell curve. That was it. You made your peak, and now all your profits are declining. Disney loses $1 billion on all their past releases. They don't learn their lesson. Recently, though, Kevin Feige, who's the king of Marvel and who's made tens of billions, if not hundreds of billions, who knows, in IP value alone, hundreds of billions, apparently is like, we got to fire all these people because they are ruining everything. And now the Marvel universe is a disaster.
Yep.
Star Wars, Lord of the Rings,
Disney has burned it all to the ground.
I think they canceled Rey. There was supposed to be a trilogy for Rey for Star Wars. That's been canceled.
Yeah, with a feminist documentary filmmaker making a blockbuster for the first time. Yeah.
Yep. And then you have The Acolyte. Canceled after the first season. Someone at Disney's getting pissed, and they're like, what is happening? It's like, dude, here's how I describe it. Jack Dorsey used to be, he's a former CEO of Twitter when it was Twitter, free speech wing of the free speech party, he said. Somehow, within 3 or 4 years, he's a woke activist. You know what happened? Long story short is, they start seeing an emergence of various types of ideology. You've got the pro-American nationalist ideology, and then you've got wokeness. But wokeness was always in line with what was deemed advertiser acceptable. Racism is bad. Anybody says something that's kind of racist is bad for advertisers. Anybody says racism is bad is good for advertisers. This created a monetary pressure in that direction. Jack Dorsey builds a system that creates these rules that promotes this kind of woke ideology, and then he starts looking at it every day. The way to describe it is he built a toilet that allowed woke activists to dump in, and then he hooked the pipe right to his mouth. So all of the refuse of woke ideology is funneling into his brain, and his brain is beginning to rot. But he can't see it because he is surrounded in every direction by woke activists. He thinks this is base reality. Meanwhile, the majority of people are watching saying that sucks. As you mentioned, Captain Marvel makes $1 billion, and they say people want more of this. No.
Yeah.
Here's the easiest way to understand it. Pirates of the Caribbean is a masterpiece. Every movie after that was garbage. So I remember when the commercials came out for Pirates 2, Dead Man's Chest, and the commercials say the #1 movie in America. And it's like, no, it's not. Pirates 1 is the #1 movie. Everyone wanted to see the second one because the first one was good and the second one sucked ass.
Yep.
So now it's turning around because after sustained failure and a loss of $1 billion, you start to ask, hey, what's going on? People don't like this stuff, man.
They don't. Well, I mean, you look at what was the blockbuster last year? It was Top Gun, right? Top Gun 2. What was in that? Just jets flying around shooting the terrorists.
Sincerity. It wasn't winking. It wasn't banter. It wasn't cynical. It wasn't political. It was just sincerity. It was masculine, and that's what people wanted.
If they get back, so one of the problems now with Marvel is the cinematic universe has become a hodgepodge of insanity that makes no sense. The multiverse, what's the guy that what's his face, Majors, who gets removed because of his scandal?
Yeah.
Now they've got. But I don't want to harp on Marvel, but all of the Disney shows they've picked up have just become a hodgepodge of weird, garbled nonsense. I don't know how they bring it back together, but that's good news because it opens the door for new and independent creators to start taking that space. So I'm excited for that. But we're about at time. So if you guys want to give your final thoughts, wrap up. I know you got a movie to promote. What's going on?
Yeah, so the January 6th, the Most Darkest Day documentary is coming out October 11th. If you want to see it, you can subscribe to the Babylon Bee. Right now, it's behind our paywall. I don't know if there's any plans to release it from that anytime soon, but if you want to see it on release day, subscribe to the Babylon Bee at our website. And yeah, I think hopefully people will enjoy it. So
you can follow me on Twitter at Lectern Leader. Also, my charity got approved by the IRS. The website's being built, so hopefully within the next month or so, we'll have some merchandise for you guys to buy. All the money that comes in for that will be going to feeding kids for Christmas and making sure they have a good Christmas this year.
Wow.
Yeah, and just follow my stuff at theblaze.com or Blaze TV. Subscribe if you can. And then we have up on YouTube, Not Behind the Paywall, is our most recent mini documentary, which is going to be a 3-part series on a day in the life of Harry Dunn. He's the most famous of the Capitol police officers who perjured himself in congressional testimony, in trial. We have proved it conclusively. The Capitol Police have done an internal investigation, but that's as far as that's gone. But now we just have to force the Judiciary Committee and the DOJ to actually do their job. So that's why we are hitting really hard in this new documentary. But it's there. Part 1 dropped yesterday. Day in the Life of Harry Dunn, Blaze TV on YouTube. Go watch it.
Right on. Well, you guys, this has been fun and funny, so I really do appreciate you guys hanging out. For everybody who is watching, smash the like button. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts, give us a good rating, because we have long neglected the audio side of everything we do. And if you apparently ratings matter. I've got these people yelling at me being like, you're not at, you got a 1 million followers listening to the podcast and all that stuff. And I'm like, okay, guys, please. So we'll be back tonight at 8 p.m. over at youtube.com/TimCastIRL. Thank you all so much, and we'll see you there.